please. I'm all discombobulated today. I take one day off that I normally take, and suddenly everything's all helter-skelter, okay? Everything's all crazy around here. GSUGambit will be here in about 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes or so. And we're going to talk today about racial issues. We recently had a discussion on Prime Kai's open panel late at night. It was like 4 in the morning. We were talking about white liberals, about racial issues, about reparations. And he made a comment that I took a little umbrage on. But I like GSUGambit, to be clear, and I think he likes me. Where he said that white liberals just do not care about black issues. And I don't think that's true in general. So I wanted to come and have him talk in a more private setting, or not private, but a smaller setting, if you will, about racial issues with me. Because I do care about these. They matter. And I wanted to kind of have a discussion where we weren't worried about being interrupted by like 10 different people. Prime Kai's panels are great. The open discussions are great, but they are a little chaotic, and it's a little too hard to have a one-on-one back and forth. So, yeah. We will see. We will see. But he won't be here for another 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes or so. He told me about 6:15. And until then, I want to talk to you guys about theft. Akana Boy made a tweet recently, if you will, a poll where he asked, and let me get the poll up so I don't misquote, so we are absolutely 100% clear what was said. A moment, please. Morally speaking, which action is worse? A, stealing $100 from a very poor person. B, stealing $100 from a very rich person. And there were 4 options. A is much worse, A is slightly worse, A and B are equally bad, or B is worse. So, B's just right out. I think we'd all agree. B is just flat out gone. So the choice becomes between, is A worse, or are they both equally bad? And I, morally speaking, would say that both are equally bad. Now, morally speaking is the key term here, because if we get into pragmatism, if we get into utilitarianism, we can obviously see A has much more potential for harm, therefore probably worse in that regard. But we're not talking about utilitarianism, or at least I'm not. I'm speaking to morals. 𝕍𝖎, hello, welcome to YouTube. My YouTube's live too, gang, if you want to go check me out there. Who is this GSUGambit, and why should I hate him? You shouldn't hate him. I like GS. He's a guy who, he's been on my stream before. It's been a while though. Conservative leading black individual that I've had several discussions with. That I simply invited on my show to have another discussion with. So yeah, that's who he is. And hopefully he will be here soon. But until then, we are going to talk about the theft. Crackle, nice to see you. TK Sus, hello. Jenny Burns, welcome. Why did you go live later on YouTube? And will you also be going live on YouTube? Yeah, I'm on YouTube right now. So TK Sus, the reason I do it is because a lot of times I'll go live first on my Twitch stream with my starting soon screen. But I've noticed that if I do that on YouTube, I get less viewers. I don't know why. And therefore, I just usually don't go live on YouTube until I'm off my starting soon screen. That's it. That's the long and short of it. There's no secret to it. Wick doesn't know how to set up streams on YouTube beforehand. I know how. It's just the way I have my OBS set up, it makes it difficult to deal with, and so I don't usually. That's it. Gambit is a centrist with opinions leaning on both sides, in my opinion. That may be fairer to say. Only a Mr. 'Bill. That's probably fair to say. He is more right-leaning than I am, for what that's worth. On a lot of issues, not all issues, but on a lot of issues. But that's okay. We still love them. Still think they're great. What do you guys think about racial issues? Do you think that white liberals can ever understand the pain of a black person? The people's elbow, so a centrist worm like Whick? I'm too fat to be a worm, okay? I'm too chubby to be a worm. Worms are thin, long, and skinny. Can't be a worm. You guys call me centrist all the time, though, and I'm clearly not. I don't know. I don't know why you guys think I'm a centrist. I sincerely do not understand how you can think of me as a centrist. I mean, I get the dunks. I get that it's fun to paint me as one. But if you honestly, truly, really, in your heart of hearts, believes that I'm a centrist, I don't think you know what the word means. Quite clearly. TK says I'm not center right either. Why again? What are my right leaning positions policy wise? Are you simply saying because I tend to be a bit of a virtue ethicist in some instances? Is that what makes me right leaning in your mind? I don't know. When the rubber meets the road, it's all about policies. What policies do you support and what policies do you not support? That's the important question. So, if you support policies that tend to lean right, you're right leaning. If you support policies that tend to lean left, you are left leaning. And we can go into what makes a policy right, what makes a policy left. That's a discussion that you can have. It can be very interesting. But at the end of the day, if your belief structure is conservative, but you're voting for Biden, you're voting blue on all the direct ballot initiatives, are you a centrist? No, clearly not. But that's just what it is. 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙, WhickTV burned a cross in my front yard, smoked me my OUID, I don't know what OUID, and wrinkled my Randy Travis poster. Sorry, Wick, I only mess with you. We agree on basically everything in our line, center, left, progressive. It's fun to mess with me. Wick isn't racist, and I'm not racist, so I should know. Lactoid TV, thank you for that stunning endorsement. Stunning endorsement. Pipa, is this about stealing $100 from rich or poor people? It is until GSUGambit gets here. We're waiting for my guest, is what's happening right now. We're waiting on him to show up. He said he'd be late, so this isn't unexpected. But when he gets here, we'll be talking about what I was going to talk about. But yeah, for now, I'm really concerned, right? When people start to measure morality based on who is the recipient of said action. It opens the door to a lot of really horrific things when you say it is less bad to do X towards this group or this person, this type of person. And that is why I push so hard against this idea that one is less wrong than the other. And I understand that a lot of you are saying, oh, both are bad, but one is more bad. I reject that framing. I think that simply because the results are or have the potential to be more extreme in one case than the other doesn't mean the action in itself is less bad. It means the results of the action are less bad, but we have to separate these two things out. And again, the reason I separate out the action and the harm, and we can measure these two things separately, is because it makes it hard to have a conversation if you do not do that, because it tends to go into weird hypotheticals, right? Where have I done anything wrong if I steal from a food pantry, but unbeknownst to me, the product that I steal from the food pantry is poisoned? Okay? I didn't know this when I stole it. Have I suddenly done a moral action? Am I a moral actor? Obviously not. I think we would all agree on that. Obviously not. What I have done is not now suddenly less bad. It just has had a good result, but by accident almost in a lot of ways. And so again, we can justify terrible things, not terrific, terrific things. We could justify terrible things when we start to decide, well, it's not as bad to do this against this person because of X, Y, or Z. So a lot of this, how this kind of plays out, this is kind of the justification a lot of people make when they talk about it's okay to be racist towards white people. Because if you are white, you have systemic power. It doesn't hurt you as much. There are less bad things. So it's okay when I'm racist. Or it's not okay, maybe, but it's less wrong and we should judge me less morally. Yeah, that's the kind of thinking that leads to one for one. It's the same thought process that leads. And again, I reject it wholeheartedly. Ironically, because of the results of the way of thinking. I reject result-based thinking because of the results of result-based thinking. But yeah, so anyone who starts arguing with you that it is less bad to steal from someone who is rich than someone who is poor is simply arguing that it's more okay to do bad things towards people because they're rich, and it's less okay to do a bad thing towards people because they are poor. These are inversely related, but they are connected. They are related. They are the same statement. Brockman, we already do. Think of what we do to criminals or drug addicts because they deserve it. It's a natural result of liberal ideology. We don't do it because they deserve it. That's not what we do. What if you steal from a terminally ill rich person? What if? All these questions. Robin Hood did nothing wrong. Robin Hood gave to the poor. It doesn't make what he stole wrong, right? Or less wrong to steal from the rich, but he gave to the poor, and that outweighed the wrong he did. Does that make sense? Hope it does. I hope it does. Yeah, this is chilling with chat time for hopefully not too much longer. Hopefully GSUGambit gets here soon. I like you, chat. But again, like I said at the beginning, maybe some of you weren't here for it. On my OBS, my chat tab broke. I'm going to try to fix it, but I just found out it broke because I was distracted arguing on my Discord about this very topic. Yeah, we like this idea that we punish people because they deserve it is anathema to the way I think. I don't punish someone because they deserve it. That's and the whole idea of punishing people is anathema to me. Well, again, we arrest and jail and fine people as a way to protect others from their actions and to disincentivize their actions. This idea that people deserve punishment, while probably true in some cases, just isn't a good way of thinking about it. I feel like Robin Hood is supposed to be conflicted. Other people don't see that. It's been a while, and it depends on the myth, right? It depends on the myth. There's a lot of different stories regarding Robin Hood, things like an eye for an eye, simple as. I reject that as well. An eye for an eye. That way of thinking is just not a good thing. No, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye. Well, I say unto you, do good to them that hurt you. Turn the other cheek. Instead of 1 mile, go 2. I really do believe that. I may not be practicing anymore in my religion, but I am absolutely a firm believer in that philosophy. I think it's good. I think it works. I think it's helpful. It makes us better people. It makes society better. But yes, Robin Hood was a socialist. On the wall, Robin Hood is only justified because the scenario he lived in had debilitating taxation. But this goes against all your Warlord Whick takes. Admiral Love, my Warlord Whick takes, which ones? The ones about American imperialism? American imperialism isn't good because we're punishing people. American imperialism is good because we're helping people. We're stopping bad actors. And often, American imperialism isn't good. There's plenty of examples where it isn't good. But overall, on the whole, it prevents Russia and China from being worse actors on the stage. But I'm not here to talk about my imperialistic takes. Today is not the Whick Warlord show. 𝕬𝖎, so many hateful people in chat. But they're hating me, so it's okay. It's okay to hate me. It's okay to watch me because you hate me. Fine to do. Let me DM GSUGambit, see where he is, so we can actually have a show today that's coherent. Instead of me just rambling back and forth. I do want to have a more in-depth conversation on the theft take. So if you really disagree with my theft take, or if you actually agree with me, please reach out and we can set something up. Hopefully on Friday. Because I had to push my Friday show, what I had planned for Friday, I had to push that back to Monday. Simply because of conflicting schedule issues. So I need a Friday show, is what I'm saying. Tomorrow, I'm going to try to have someone on to discuss the Burning Man situation. And then on Thursday, I'm going to have Loner Box on. I'm going to have Mixed Vivian Wolf. I'm going to have PF Young. And I'm going to have Red on. And we're going to talk about the Jordan Peterson situation in Canada. How he's being, he was sued. Or he sued for his institution, the college he works for, not to require him to take some kind of course, and he failed at it. So we're going to discuss all of that on Thursday. But yeah, today I'm trying to get a discussion on racial issues here, and I'm hoping my guest shows up at some point. I'm hoping my guest shows up. I like Vivian Wolf. You guys don't like Vivian Wolf. I like Vivian Wolf. I don't like some of her takes. I don't like some of her style, but I like her. I think that it's important and good to have people that will vehemently disagree with you and can do so in a pleasant manner. Like Vivian, look, she'll probably never admit this. But I think she actually respects me. I think that's true. And it's good to hear from people, right? Again, that I disagree with. And I do disagree with Vivian on a lot of things. But, yeah. That is that. Oh, man. I'm really batting 1,000 these last couple weeks. First Origin stands me up. I hope GSU doesn't stand me up. I hope he's just late. I was looking for... I confirmed this with him this weekend on Sunday, I believe. Yeah, I hope he's gonna be here soon. I am a tri-racial man. It's actually more racist to not have me on instead of GSU. Oh, fair enough. Whick already negative 14,000 points on the progressive scale. Claims that he likes Vivian Wolf to try and climb back a few points, but it's still in vain. Still at negative 13,987. 𝕬𝖎, man, I am not sure if we should be taking our scale from the likes of Twitter and Twitch leftists. They're a different breed. Online left and actual left are separate things, and we forget that on these spaces. We forget that in these spaces a lot of times. What else? Did everyone have a good Labor Day weekend? What did you all do? Did you all spend time with family? Did you go to barbecues? Did you celebrate our labor? Hope you did. Hope you did. Let's see what else I have to talk about while we wait. Oh, I'm trying to set up a show with Jesse Singal. Did you guys see his appearance on the Majority Report with Sam Cedar? I was deeply disappointed in Sam Cedar during that discussion. Deeply disappointed in Sam Cedar. Jesse Singal, love him or hate him, a lot of people really unfairly, I feel, misconstrue his position. And Sam Seder, live on air, did that same thing. One particular exchange was that Sam Seder asked him something along the lines, or accused him, I should say, of, you don't, isn't it true you've never said that trans people can be happy? And Jesse Singal's like, actually, I did in this article that you're citing. I said that. Sam Seder responded with something along the lines, but I bet you buried it at the end, huh? And Jesse Singal is like, no, it was at the top, actually. Sam Seder looks at the article and then says, well, it wasn't at the top, you liar. It was at the first 25%. Come on. Let's be a little honest. I don't know. You can disagree with Singal. You absolutely can. But don't lie. Don't lie to do it. Don't lie live on air when the facts can be verified by anyone with pair of eyes. Why would you do this? Why? I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I don't watch a lot of Majority Report. But that's a taste thing. I'm not a big fan of the dunking. I know a lot of people like the dunking, and that's what Sam Seder does. He's a dunker. Okay, he likes to have people on a call and dunk them. That's what he does. Which is fine. It's entertaining. It just, again, it leads to weird discussions like the one he had with Singal, which there's a discussion to be had here, but we weren't able to have it because you're too busy trying to get dunks on things and yell over him and all these things. But I actually invited him on the show, and I would have him on against people who substantively disagree with him, but I'd make sure that he was actually able to talk, which would be the difference between our shows. Also, a massive viewership difference. Let's not pretend otherwise. But I would absolutely make sure that he was able to have the discussion, because I think it's important to have, whether you agree with him or not. These are the questions of our times. These are the debates of our times. These are the information of our times, and it's good. GSU, great, awesome. Now I don't have to continue to deal with chat. 𝕼𝖍𝖎𝖙 says, you're not a fan of yourself dunking, and you absolutely have an entire platform based on getting people to dunk on others, not to mention your Twitter aggression. My Twitter aggression? Am I aggressive on Twitter, gang? Am I aggressive on Twitter? Am I a meanie? Is Whick a meanie head on Twitter? I don't know if I am. Maybe I am. Far more aggressive than when you're cammed up? Perhaps. But that's still not aggressive. I don't think I'm very... Look, I think I can be pretty aggressive sometimes. But no one agrees with me. I don't yell and I don't scream usually. But I think I'm pretty aggressive. I don't know. I guess by nature I'm a bridge builder at the end of the day. I got some ramen, gang. I'm going to eat some ramen while we wait. You get to watch me eat. I try not to choke on my tongue. Rezi, what's with the hate today? Good morning, I love you, Rezi. Yeah, why? Oh, that's not towards me. Okay, never mind. Carry on. I don't know who you're talking about, so. You lost your mind on me and GSUGambit? I was pretty aggressive with you and GSUGambit, yeah. That's true. I don't know, yeah, I don't know if anyone would say I'm not aggressive sometimes. When it calls for it. When you called for it. You guys are ideologists. Ideological brained? I don't know how to say it. Yeah. I'm a messy. I'm sorry, gang. Sorry. I apologize. So yeah, once he gets here, he's in chat. He said he'd be about 5 minutes max. We're going to talk about one of the comments he made to me about how the reason I The reason I oppose reparations, and I don't oppose all forms of reparations, to be clear. I just wasn't a fan of the forms that they were talking about. The reason I oppose it is because I'm white and I don't care about black issues, not in my core. He said it not as a dig, but as a statement of fact, and that I am just as guilty as all white liberals. If I've misphrased that, if I've mischaracterized that, I am sure he will tell me as soon as he gets here. But that's the discussion. I'm one of the most ideology-brained on Twitch. How? I don't understand. Not ideology brain. I'm pretty open to hearing new things. I am the epitome of liberal ideology. Am I its like figurehead now? Have I personally by myself ended history? I'd like to think so. I'd like to. Man, you guys make me into a fucking badass. Like, wow. Okay, GSU, I'll pull you in. Hello.
Yo.
Hey,
how's
you're
it going, man?
live. You got a cam for us today?
Yes, I definitely have cam. Give me 1 second. Why am I forgetting how to turn on the Discord camera?
Look, it's been a long weekend, okay? Did you have a fun Labor Day?
Yes, it was extremely fun.
Great.
Had fun. Some friends, some fam. So, yeah, it was awesome, man. How about you?
Oh, it was relaxing. I enjoyed it a lot. It did throw me off scheduling wise though, because I've been pretty consistent in every Monday, every Tuesday having a stream, and then I felt behind since I didn't do any of that yesterday.
Yeah, I always felt like the Sunday, if Monday is like a holiday, it's really Saturday. Yeah, it throws me off.
It throws you off. Anyway, I wanted to thank you for agreeing to come on and talk to me for a bit. It was 4 a.m. I think when we were talking on Prime Kai's show.
Yes.
And in addition, there's like 10 people there all trying to yell at each other. So it makes it hard to actually kind of dig into what people are actually saying. And so that's one of the reasons I invited you on, and to try to have a hopefully productive and interesting discussion on some of the issues that we touched on the show. So you made a statement, and it's been a while. So if I misphrase it or if I get it wrong, please correct me. But it was something along the lines of, the reason that you oppose reparations is because you are a white liberal, and white liberals just do not care about black issues. And I wanted to kind of talk to you about that. First of all, is that an accurate representation?
I think it's pretty accurate. I think the important thing to note is that I wouldn't say all white liberals. I think that there are a subset of people, and I think it's less than majority, to be clear, just so you understand. Like, I want to make sure I'm communicating like size to you as well. I think less than the majority is it their like not true passion, but I think it's less a part of their calculus than some of the more liberal goals that spread amongst everybody. So yeah, let me try to say this in a simplified way. In my experience, lots of liberals, lots of white liberals for sure, black liberals too, but a lot of white liberals care more about virtue signaling to black issues rather than a deep desire to fix most of those black issues. And they take a much more multiculturalist stance whenever it comes to addressing black issues, even if they can elucidate how all of those issues directly happen to black people solely because they were black. So I think most liberals, white or black, are very good at detecting and informing why certain issues have happened to black people, but rarely do I see solutions for Black people that don't also involve the baggage of trying to do it for everybody and those types of things. And specific to the conversation that was happening around reparations, this is where I kind of grouped you into that group, because we're talking about reparations for things that were done to Black people specifically because they were Black. And I think, correct me here if I'm wrong, your statement was, well, I wouldn't do anything specific to Black people, but I'd try to do something class-based, and that might disproportionately help Black people. So I hope that we help Black people through trying to help everybody. And that was where I tied your statement into like this somewhat pattern I've seen, where I think you could elucidate all of the, you know, atrocities that are happening to Black people, and you could talk about how, no, this was specifically because they were Black, it wasn't because of some other minority status. But in the solution is always a multiculturalist or a multi-minority approach, rather than things specific for Black people, given that the reason Black people are in these situations are specifically because they're Black.
No, that is accurate. That is my stance. And I wanted to kind of talk about why with you.
Mm-hmm.
That's my stance, because I think that what I took umbrage with at the time, and I still do, is that means I don't want to solve the issue. I absolutely do. I think that our difference here is one way of treating it as a Black issue. I don't think we'll solve it, and I'll explain why as we go, right? And I also think that it will cause more harm in the long run, just to everyone in general. Let me kind of explain what I mean by both those statements. So, well, I guess I'll ask you this. Do you think that today in America we have the political will to give reparations to Black Americans?
I think, like I said on the panel, political will is a function of the ideas of the people during that time. And I think because a lot of our liberal base approaches Black issues in the way that you do, I would say, no, we don't have the political will to actually solve these problems in the way that I think would be more appropriate. Because I think that's a function of the arguments that you and I are having, and not necessarily something that has to be. So I think if my goal in this conversation, just like you have a goal, is I want you to understand my frame of reference such that you would potentially fight for things in a different way. And as that grows, we now have the political will to do these things in a way that I think is more admirable or more likely to solve the root issues.
And I think we're getting to the crux of it earlier, right? Because I think this is where we part ways, is I don't believe that treating it as a Black issue, even though it absolutely is a Black issue, is going to actually solve the problem. And I would rather solve the problem and not virtue signal about it and be a little and take a little hit optically, because it is an optical hit when you say, well, it's a Black issue, but honestly, we have to treat it as a class issue because otherwise nothing's going to get done. And I think that looks bad, it sounds bad, but it's, in my opinion, just true. And so the reason I tackle this from a class perspective is because there's much more political will to, and I think there always will be for the foreseeable future, in order to get things done on a class-based, at least in America, at least in a democracy, right? In a class-based way. And I don't think it might help Black people more. I think it will help Black people more because Black people are disproportionately less well off. They are disproportionately in a lower class. And because my solution is class-based, it will therefore disproportionately help Black people. And that is, I think, has much more political will. It's more pragmatic, and I think it's simply better politics. And I understand the frustration how that can be frustrating. I do. I just think that at the end of the day, I don't care about the looks of it. I care what actually happens. But that's my thoughts, right? Did we lose you? Did we lose me? Oh, if you're talking, we can't hear you. Oh no, they took him out. I promise this ain't me. Yeah, we can't hear you, buddy. Can you hear me? Technical difficulties, gang. Technical difficulties. Man, I just my argument was so good. He's literally speechless, gang. Another win for Whick. The marketplace of ideas. Okay, he'll be back hopefully in a minute. Give him a second. Drag him back in. Hello?
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I don't know what happened, dude. Like midway through you talking, it's like my internet temporarily dropped. Am I on VPN? No, I'm not on VPN. I don't know what happened, but yeah. But we're back now.
Where did we get to? Where did we get to before we dropped out?
You said this is the crux of the issue. I think you said you felt like it would be a virtue signal to be taking the stance that we should address these as Black issues because you don't think it's realistic that it'll be solved. And then right after that, you started dropping.
Let me start from the beginning because there's a whole through line. So forgive me for repeating myself.
No problem.
I think that I care more about solving the issue than looking good doing it. I think that it's an optical hit to say that it is a Black issue. Even though it's true, it's not a Black issue. Even though it is. So I want to be clear with you. It is something that was done to Black people specifically. It is a problem with Black people specifically. And it needs to, and that, I understand the argument that it.
You was about to say a great statement. You almost.
I understand the argument.
As a Black issue.
I understand the argument that it should be addressed as a Black issue. But when we talk about politics, and the only way this is getting done is politically, politics is the art of the possible. And given that, I don't think that now or in the foreseeable future we have the ability, right, politically, get it passed simply for Black people. I think that my number one argument is that we can't do it that way, but we can do it pragmatically through things like UBI. And the evidence I give for that is we actually almost passed UBI in the 70s under Nixon, of all people. It got very close to actually getting through. A bill was proposed. It went to debate. It didn't have the votes from Democrats because the Democrats thought it wasn't enough.
They found out Black people was going to get it. No, I'm joking. But go ahead.
I mean, maybe. But they thought it wouldn't be enough money at the time, so they nixed it, and it just never got brought back again. I think that we can bring that up again. I think Andrew Yang ran that what little fame he had, that was his take that got him in the spotlight. I think that there's a lot of people on the right and the left who recognize that there are poor people in this country being hurt. And if we start treating it as a class issue rather than as a Black issue, we can bring people on board who otherwise wouldn't be. Now, I have other problems with reparations too, which I believe we talked about a little bit, that are more moral, but they're more nuanced. But we'll get to those as we go. First, let's address this one. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned this on the panel with you. I can't remember, or maybe it was after you left, or maybe it was a different panel. But there was a point in time in which some of the ideas that you have, I used to have as well. And I departed from that. One of the big things that made me depart from that line of thinking is, one thing that is true is that the reason even intra-class these issues arise are different. And I think the differences of why some of these different poverty situations arise is important when it comes to the solution. So for example, there's been a lot of like multicultural or class-based things like opportunity zones, let me think of another one. What's the shit that just got repealed? Affirmative action. There's a lot of these things that are done, and in the nature of the law, they're done as like race blind. And we can see that when these things are implemented, rarely do they disproportionately affect Black people, right? So if we talk about something like affirmative action, I think the group that's most helped by that policy is white women. It's not even black men or Black women, right? When we talk about opportunity zones, I think there's some, I have to look this up, so I could be incorrect on the facts, but I think the majority of the wealth for opportunity zones went to white men, not actually those that are constituents to the neighborhoods that those opportunity zones are set up for. So when we try to attack a lot of these situations in a race blind way, because we're ignoring either the disparity problem in how things are handed out or some other very complicated thing that's nuanced to the specific legislation, we miss that though Black people make up the biggest proportionality of that pie, that doesn't mean that those policies will actually flow down to the Black people. It's intended to help. So I think what happens is we do create race blind policy and we implement it, and then it doesn't have the intended effects that it should have, that we inspired that it's going to have on Black people, but it does have those positive effects on others due to some complicated factors in implementation. So that's another reason why, even though I agree with you that I think the country has more of a will to attempt to solve these in a race-based way, in a race-neutral way, it always seems like in implementation, there's complexities that causes even those policies to not disproportionately help Black people.
Sure. I would take issue that at least with affirmative action. I'm not as familiar with opportunity zones as I should be clear with. I can't really discuss on that, but on affirmative action at least, the intent was to help Black people as well as women at this time, right? There were multiple people that needed help, and so we tried to do it to help things like that. But that was one of the arguments against it. It was that it was not race blind, and we saw the effects of this when it came to colleges and things like that. Is again, it disproportionately was meant to target different races. It didn't end up targeting. You're right. It didn't end up helping them. For again a lot of reasons, depending on which lens we want to look through, whether it be schooling, whether it be the workplace. Affirmative action didn't have the effect it did. But to say that we did it as a race blind policy, I don't know if that's true. I take issue with that. I think that was meant specifically to help.
I agree that I should amend that. We did it in a Black agnostic way. It wasn't race neutral, but it was Black agnostic. Yeah, that's what I should have said. For sure.
Well, that gets into my second argument against reparations, but I want to table that for now. I want to start with the pragmatism first. Is one of the reasons that these things get passed in a Black agnostic way, do you think, because we just don't have the political will to get Black, what's the opposite of Black agnostic? Black specific policies passed?
Yeah, I think so. My thoughts on this, and I like I said, I don't know when you joined that panel and when you, because I was there for like 6 hours. So.
Yeah, I wasn't there for 6 hours. I saw it popping off at night, and I jumped in when you were trying to get Nick deplatformed.
Yeah, which I didn't know Nick was. I didn't know him and Erudite was a thing.
Funny.
He was just this annoying ass person that was joining to me. But we ended up having productive conversation. So that was great. But yeah. So before you joined, maybe I was talking to Erudite and whoever the other guy that was on the panel, and I said that I think the political will problem is twofold. I do think, and I can't give you a percentage, but I do think there's a lot of people who just are not interested in helping Black people, even on the liberal side, right? We aren't talking about, for anybody that might be listening, we aren't talking about conservatives in this conversation because I don't think they're at all interested in the conversation. So it's not like I'm saying, oh, white liberals are a problem in this, but the conservatives are like on board. I'm not saying that. I will say that about certain specific things, but not overall. So just to get that out of the way. But I think it's twofold. I think one issue is there are people that just don't want to help Black people. I think the other issue, which is a little bit more hidden, is that there's a lot of people who I believe are apathetic about helping Black people because previous things haven't helped Black people, and they don't understand the nuances of why those things didn't help. So I think there's a lot of people who have somewhat given up, or they don't think there's going to be a good return. So they don't fight for things in a non-agnostic way because they don't find value in it, or they don't think it's going to be valuable. And I think that those two problems are the bulk of the white liberal problem that I was bringing up.
I guess you're right in the fact that I don't think reparations will work. at least as I've seen it proposed. But and again, there's a lot of reasons for why I don't think it will work, even if it got passed. But reparations alone, I guess, for the purpose of the discussion, can you tell me just briefly what you would like to see? Describe reparations for me. Best. You're not a policy expert. I'm not a policy expert.
Yeah.
But best attempt, right? Reparations happens. What would you like to see?
Yeah, so I'll try to be super short-winded, but it'll probably take like
Take your
45
time.
seconds.
It's only the two of us, so yeah.
Yeah.
Take whatever time you need.
I think at its root, reparations is like a payment for a wrongdoing sanctioned by the government in some way. It's kind of what I would try to boil that down to. There's probably different things, but we'll try to focus on that for this conversation. So wrongdoing by the government, and they're like, somewhat paying for a wrongdoing that they had. Now, when it comes to specific implementation, the things that I would like to see, the things that I fight for are usually more contemporary, even though I can definitely fight for slavery as well. But the more contemporary things I would talk about are like the Vietnam War, redlining, the CIA pushing crack into the Black community, other things related to Jim Crow.
Maybe I didn't communicate right. What I understand all that, but what do you like? Are we talking cash payment? Are we talking multiple like when the nuts and bolts of it, right? Like, how do you see this being implemented as a policy in your ideal world, right?
In my ideal is a tricky word here. In the world that I advocate for right now, I would advocate for cash payments. So that was like a 2-hour conversation over this on the panel. So I'm trying to like synthesize all this down to small sentences. But I think that the history of reparations, I think across the globe, I don't think this is specific to just the US. Most times when this has happened, it's been cash payments. Now there are things like certain, I think, sects of Indians have like unprecedented access to education, things like that. But in the most typical form, reparations is usually some sort of transfer of either money or something that equates to monetary value from some entity to the affected group.
Do all Black descendants of slaves get this, or only ones under a certain threshold?
But this is why the specific reparation that we're talking about matters. If we're talking about reparations for slavery and we're skipping all the other ones, I would say that yes, we would try to figure out a way to largely target ADOS people and attempt to do it that way. Now, how we do that when most Black people have had their records destroyed or never had records from the beginning, I have no clue on that part of the implementation. But in spirit, I think what would be most just is trying to get something for the descendants of slavery. And likely you'll have to include some broader group because there's no way to hyper specify the group because we don't have documentation.
Sure. So in just again to test the limits here, right? So you would give first how much we talking cash payment wise? We talking 1,000, 10,000, 100,000? Okay. So let's assume some amount of money.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Some trillions amount of dollars.
Yeah. I've heard various figures bandied about in anywhere from 50,000 to something that's paid over like a span of years. That's much more. Different people.
My favorite form that I've heard is some kind of modified UBI for Black people. Because I'm a big UBI fan, right? So I want UBI policy. If you just tax something,
but if you're Black, you get a bigger UBI
for some period of time. Yeah, that's probably the form that I've heard the most that I like the most because it's tied to wanting to get rid of the current welfare state and blah blah blah. But the form that I've heard of the most that I agree with would be some form of modified UBI. But that's not to say that I would limit myself to that. That's just my most preferential form.
I'm just trying to because it's hard to discuss this in totality because there's just so many different ideas. So I'm trying to get more specific so we can discuss this specifically. So in your world, would Oprah get this?
Yeah, I hate the idea of means testing. That's why I'm a fan of UBI. Completely hate the idea of means testing.
Sure. So
it creates bureaucracy and a whole bunch of other issues, and like it doesn't make sense to me. it's not worth the squeeze.
But you can
Over
see
would get the 1K or the 10K or the 100K
sure,
or
but
whatever
you
it
can
would be.
see how the government cashing a check to Oprah for $1,000+, let's $50,000, or giving her a monthly stipend might not sit well with someone who is white, who is sitting in a trailer park, who is struggling to make ends meet, and watching very rich people be given money because of the circumstances of their past. You can see how that might be a little optically bad, for lack of a better term.
I
right?
agree that it could be optically bad. I think to that group of people, what I would say is they likely don't understand the impacts that means testing has on their current life. And if they did, they probably wouldn't be fans of means testing. I can't find good arguments for means testing. It seems to always, in implementation, not in theory, in implementation, hurt the group that it's intended to help more so than help, even if there are some dollars saved. So let's say, for the sake of this argument, if you're in the top 10% earners and you're black, you don't get whatever this reparations is, right? That likely doesn't equate to an amount that's worth the squeeze to try and implement that type of policy.
I mean, we do it for taxes all the time, right? Like, we have a pretty progressive tax system, or we should at least, where we would pay less
Yeah.
if you make more, or pay the opposite, pay more if you make more, pay less if you make less, right? That's something I fight for, is the progressive tax brackets, where if you make under a certain threshold, you just don't pay taxes. I think that there is a lot of sound argument for that. I just wonder why we wouldn't, like, we can do it. I reject the notion that this is something that is impossible or not worth the squeeze. And I think that just when we talk about justice, and when we talk about equality, I think it's important that we do recognize that there are some people who have overcome on their own and maybe do not need the government assistance to overcome more. Because at the end of the day,
no, go ahead.
Yeah, let me finish this real quick, because one of the other one of the other differences we have is that I do not care about past injustices being fixed through money, as much as I do caring about fixing the inequalities that exist today amongst people. We can recognize that because of the past injustices, that we have massive inequalities amongst black populations in America today. That was the reason, or one of the reasons that happens. And there are still injustices that happen today that we should absolutely tackle and fix and get rid of. But I think that as soon as you have overcome and you no longer need that assistance, I don't know. It's like the 9/11 victim, right? You know, the families of 9/11 victims get a stipend, right? They get money for what happened. I'm against the rich people getting the money in that case.
So, yeah, like I agree that optically it seems weird. If I had to boil this down to an analogy, if something happened where lots of people's legs got cut off, and some member of this group was able to overcome, buy a prosthetic, and they're blossoming and doing better in life. To me, if I'm paying for some wrongdoing, it's less important about the current state of those individuals, and it's more about I'm paying for an injustice that I did, right? Like the core of reparations is that was an injustice, and I'm attempting to rectify that in some way, usually monetarily. So the current, but hold on. But so the current state of them isn't really important to me. Now, what I will say, let's say we had a reparations committee, and they said, hey, you know, this would be the dollar amount if we did this. This would be the dollar amount if we did this. And there was widespread support for, hey, if we exclude the top 10%, top 5%, top whatever percent black wage earners, we could do this for the rest of black people. Would I be willing to make that concession? Absolutely, for sure. Yeah, don't give Oprah money and give everybody else money. I'd be for that. But I think out of the gate, it just seems weird to try and means test that when the reason we're doing it is because this group was impacted and we're trying to rectify a wrongdoing that we did. So if it came down to small implementation details and it was like, hey, we have these two options, either nothing is going to happen or something is going to happen that excludes high wage earners or high wealth earners or whatever, I'd be for that for sure.
Are you familiar? And this may seem like a bit of a non sequitur, but I promise. Are you familiar with Glenn Loury?
Yeah, for sure.
Harvard. I think it was a Harvard. Yeah. I'm
Brown.
not sure where he. Brown. Okay, Brown professor.
Yeah.
Economics professor. His argument against reparations, and it's one that I'd like to bring up here to see.
Mm-hmm.
So one of his concerns with reparation is that once it is done, people will care even less than they do now about black inequalities, black disparities, and things like that, because that reparation has been done. The slate is now clean. We have paid for the sin of the past. Good to go. You're fixed now. And that is, I think, to me, a very, very valid concern. It is one of the arguments that actually people ask me when I change my mind on things. Hearing him talk about this issue with John McWhorter absolutely changed my mind on reparations, because I used to think like you do now, right? We've switched positions here.
Mm-hmm.
That I thought, okay, yeah, there's a real injustice. We need to fix this problem. But I think that by putting a price tag on the pain, right? Putting this kind of price tag on things isn't fixing it. It's, in fact, a Band-Aid. It's a virtue signal in and of itself. That, look, we're just going to throw money at it, and now we're done. Whereas I think that the issues that continue to plague Black America are systemic in nature. And while, yes, money helps, it's not going to solve the problem. They will still continue. So, yeah, how would you respond to that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so, yeah, Glenn Loury, I love Glenn. I love John. Shout out to
great.
Well, used to be the black guys at Blogging Heads. Now Glenn has his own platform, for sure. So I've heard that exact conversation. And I've heard many, many people make that argument. And I think the problem was also addressed in that panel, probably before you joined. When people look at reparations as a fix for previous systemic wrongs, I think you've already entered the argument incorrectly. So the whole concept of saying that I've given reparations and I've fixed that comes from the idea that the reparations and the monetary value that you're assigning just so you give people some relief, thinking of that as a fix is the problem. So the big argument that I was having with Erudite is like all of this whole like, oh yeah, if we do school, if we do this, there's so many factors in that there's no way, first off, there's no way you're ever going to estimate that you're going to fix the problem. And then two, in implementation, the changing details year over year, day over day, month over month are going to make it such that even your models that you use to attempt to come up with this data to estimate is going to be changing. So like when things aren't implemented correctly, or if things aren't doing help, you're not going to be able to pinpoint some specific set of variables that can make it better. So I think it's a fool's gold game to even enter the conversation of this reparation will fix this systemic wrong. The reparation is just, hey, I'm sorry we fucked you over. Here, I don't mean to cuss. I don't know. We should cuss.
You can cuss, just no slurs.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I messed up. Here's something that I'm doing to try and address it. That's what I see reparations as. So on one hand, I think that conversation from Glenn is a buy-in to something that is never agreed in any reparations. There's no reparations where we thought, hey, what we're giving you is going to fix all the problems that we created for you as the government.
Well, so certainly you don't think that, right? And certainly a lot of other people don't think that, but there's a lot of people who do, right? And
well,
you can say it's ignorant. You can say it's ignorant and incorrect, but that is the result, right? Of what
I want to be specific with my words here. The stated goal of the reparations has never been this will rectify. So whether or not people fabricate things to themselves that this is actually going to fix it, there hasn't been a piece of reparations legislation or policy or anything that I've seen where the stated goal is this is going to rectify all previous ills. So if people have construed that this should do that, it's not within any document that supports the reparation.
I understand. I think maybe something's missing here. and I'm not sure if I'm missing it or you're missing it. It could be either way, to be very clear with you. Because what I'm saying isn't that people will think it's fixed, but that the slate is clean. And what I mean by that is that as I understand it, reparations, we did it wrong, and we need to pay for that injustice. We need to do something because you have had something done unto you, and we need to acknowledge that by not necessarily fixing it, by this is like a liability that we have that we're paying. So when I say that people will think the slate is clean, some of them will think it's fixed. That's a separate conversation. But some will say, okay, our injustice claim that you have is now paid for. You no longer have that injustice. And I think that might be a problem, because there are, in every, again, in most cash reparations situations, those systemic issues we still have today will still exist. That injustice will not have actually gone away.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
I agree with everything you're saying, and this is what I would say. I bite the apple on this that a lot of people, for some reason, don't want to bite. I think the slate is clean when you pay for reparations, because the reparations is a payment for wrongdoing. It's never going to be enough, or whatever word we want to use instead of enough. But to me, the slate for that is clean. Now, if we talk about policy due to other factors that exist in culture today, that's a separate conversation from the reparations. So if I pay reparations and Black schools are still severely underfunded, that's not a problem of the reparation. That's a problem of policy that we need to do for the education system today. So those people that wipe their hands clean, if they're wiping their hands clean, like, hey, we paid for slavery, or we paid for the Vietnam vets, or we paid for redlining, or whatever, I am very okay with those people kind of sort of wiping their hands with it. But the conversation of current systemic problems is separate completely from that conversation of reparations. And that's why I'm okay with that conversation.
I understand that you're separating it, but in most conversations of reparations I've heard, both on Twitch and from more academic settings, they're tied hand in hand. The systemic,
which is the problem. That's why we don't have
it. It is a problem. Is what I'm trying to highlight here. Right? I'm agreeing with you. It's something that it's almost impossible to get away from, because people. So the people ask, hey, we want reparations for the injustices done to us, because, and so people will ask the next question to follow up. Okay, well, how are you hurt by it today? Because if we go back enough in our history, every group, every person, every family, every individual has ancestors on which horrific things had been done, right?
We're talking America, though.
In my
specific.
in my history, right? I have people who own slaves, and I had slaves. I am a descendant of African American slaves, but I'm many generations disconnected. Many, it's not even close. So do I get reparations? I don't know if I should, because I haven't faced any of the systemic injustices because of how I look. I am not, I don't consider myself Black. I'm not Black. But again, I've had an ancestor who was.
And yeah, this is a conversation I had with plenty of people. So when it comes to, hey, because of the rampant rape, which is also a part of slavery and everything, should people who wouldn't be the target to the racism that their ancestor had to deal with, should those people be included? My answer would be no, because the reparations is being done specifically because of the harms done to those people because they were Black. So if you are a descendant now of likely some rape between a slaver and a slave, I don't think you should be entitled, because
I mean, I agree with you.
You wouldn't be subject to the things that caused the situation for us to get reparations.
It would be silly if I did get reparations. In fact, I would. Yeah. I mean, I'd take the money. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'd be like, okay,
yeah, for sure, you should.
I'd pocket that shit.
If they came out with policy.
Did I get a raid on YouTube? From Lonerbox? Maybe I did. Anyway, what was I saying?
About the descendant of
and how they're intrinsically tied. But you see in that statement you just made there, well, you wouldn't be included because we're talking about the harms done. and we look at the things today and it's like, okay, well, there are harms done today. And so I can see this is why these things are often conflated and often kind of tied into, is because it's almost impossible to talk about it, because the harms of slavery have propagated. They have it was like a stone thrown in a lake. And while the stone is no longer being thrown, right? We're no longer dumping rocks in the lake. There's still huge amounts of ripples that we're dealing with that are upsetting what should be kind of a level playing field. Now, the instinct a lot of people have, because we know that the ripples were the direct result of this stone, is like, well, okay, now we have to kind of tackle the stone still instead of the ripples. And I think that's just a wrong way of looking at it. It's not going to actually help the problem, and that's what I want to do. I just and if your argument here and what you said was, I don't care about the slavery, or I don't care that
I
people,
prioritize it less.
Yeah, I prioritize it less.
Prioritize all of the other reparations.
I mean, that's true. I mean, you're not wrong. I to put it kind of like a flippantly, I care about American issues, not white issues, not black issues, not Asian issues, not any other issues. I care about American issues. And so I think that you were right to say, I don't care about black issues as much as I do.
Wait, that's not what I was saying. I'm sorry. I thought we were following the same. No. What I was saying, that in the types of reparations I fight for black people, the one for slavery is the one I fight for the least. One, because I understand the opposite of it. I understand a lot of people don't understand all of the ripples in the water. But when I talk about things that happened in Vietnam, when I talk about the CIA pushing crack into black communities, when I talk about redlining, those things are more contemporary. The people who were hurt in a lot of situations are also still alive. And I specifically bring this up because this is how I tease out the people, if we go back to the beginning of the conversation, that actually want to help black people versus the ones who don't. Hold on.
Please.
Just the national conversation around reparations today, to me, exists at the slavery level because of all of the optical and other things that exist. So in my mind, white liberals, not exactly you, but the group you belong to, create this conversation of reparations only about slavery because they know that optically that's never going to win.
Well, no. No, that's not why. It's because when I ask you who gets reparations, you say African American descendants of slaves.
Oh, no, but I talked about no. Because you said let's not talk about those and let's talk about this reparation. If we talk about the Vietnam War, the demographic of people who would get that would be the people who were denied access to the GI Bill and all those other things.
So it would grow beyond the descendants of slaves. So
it would be a smaller subset, right? It'd be the people who were negatively impacted after the Vietnam War. It would be the people who live in those communities where the CIA literally
it might be a larger subset. I don't know the demographics off the top of my head, but unless you are also requiring them to also be descendant of slaves as well as
no, I'm not. I'm only talking about those black people, and this is a bigger group of black because it's not just descendants of slavery at this point.
I understand.
It's immigrants as well.
But then,
so if we talk about the reparations for the Vietnam War, the demographic is people who served in the Vietnam War that didn't get the GI Bill. If we talk about redlining, it's the people who lived in the communities who weren't allowed to live outside of those communities. If we talk about the crack cocaine, it's the communities that we know were forced drugs in those. So my control group changes based off the reparations that we're talking about. The reason why I don't think we talk about these other reparations is because optically, I think I should maybe say white Democrats in charge know that that's never going to pass. So they hyperfixate on this almost impossibility rather than things that exist for people who are living today. And when those people die, the argument will be the same as slavery. Well, those people have died. We don't know how we're going to do it. We don't know who they are, how we find their names, what's the group. All of that happens because the Democrats that are in charge want to fixate on the reparations that is least likely to pass. All of this ties back into, this is why I think these things are more intentional than they are by happenstance.
Let me chew on that. Might have a thing here. Might actually be right. I'll have to think about that more. I understand that. I just tell me on the intentionality of it, because that's, I think, going to be the sticking here. I think that people talk about it through the lens of slavery because, again, every discussion I've had with Black people about this, to be clear, has been through the lens of slavery. Almost every single one. Very rarely am I talking about reparations for Vietnam vets or for the crack cocaine epidemic. They often will also mention those things, but it is under the umbrella, the larger umbrella of reparations, slavery. And they will point to these things as direct outcomes of slavery. That's the justification they get. So I'm not sold on the intentionality here, but maybe you have an argument for it that I've heard. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think media drives conversation a lot. There's a circular, right, dependency where sometimes conversations then drive media, right? But I think specifically when it comes to reparations, this argument is set at the like congressional committee level, and then it filters down into day-to-day conversations. So I think those people are in control of the narrative about reparations. Those people have heard the arguments for other reparations, but they specifically hyperfixate on the one that's for people that aren't alive and less likely to pass just by just talking about it. Everybody knows that if you had to choose what's the political will on these or what's the likelihood that it's going to pass, the one that's talked about the most today is the least likely. It is the most, destructive or nasty or whatever, but it's also the least likely to pass. So you have to wonder why sitting members of Congress or people on Senate committees are hyperfixating on the thing that is least likely to change. And you have to ask yourself, is it ignorance? Is it they have this gigantic hope to try and rectify a past evil that they think might be more impactful, or is it intentional? Right? There's nothing that leads me to believe that the Democratic Party is just so hopeful and wishing to fix historic Black issues. So I throw that one out the window. Is it ignorance? I think it could be, but I'm more convinced that it's intentional. So the three options, I'm not saying that these are the only three options,
Sure.
but the three options that I can conspire is those three. And I think in order, I would say intentionality is first, ignorance is probably second, and then the hope is likely third.
I'll give you my take on this, on why this is the focus and why the media and politicians focus on, because that's what their constituents are doing. Like, I think that in certain cases, yes, media can drive narratives, but for the most part, I think they don't drive narratives, they frame narratives. So here's the difference. The discourse is happening, and then they will frame it in different ways to appease whatever political idea that they want. That's why you see Fox News lean right a lot and MSNBC lean left on their line. They're talking about the same issues, but they're framing it in very different ways in a lot of cases. Now, there are examples of the right not covering things that the left does and vice versa. That absolutely exists. But when it comes to reparations, I see the left-wing media and right-wing media both talk about the same thing. They do frame it differently, but I think that's because they believe, whether rightly or wrongly, is that that's what it is because most of the people they talk to, most of the people you'll talk to, is what it is. So I think that while you were saying that they're doing it in order to get people to talk about it that way, I would posit that I think more likely is that they're talking about it that way because that's how people are talking about it. That would be my guess. Politicians are a much easier answer. They will do or say whatever it was, they'll get them the most votes. And so if they phrase it in the way that their voters want, they will absolutely, or they think the voters want them to phrase it, that's what they'll do. I don't think there is any more intent behind it than that.
I think I agree with that position but only on non-fringe topics. And I view reparations as somewhat of a fringe topic.
What do you mean? What do you mean by fringe topic?
If you ask me how many times have I talked about reparations that weren't related to Twitch or some hyper political thing, it's zero. No, like most people aren't talking about reparations. The conversation of reparations is fringe in the global context of, in the national context of conversations that people have. And it's kind of like UBI as well. Like UBI isn't this thing that everybody talks about, right? The conversation over UBI is energized by national, like Andrew Yang and other people bringing that up, and then people start conversations from it. So I view like a lot of these fringe political topics as top down rather than bottom up. If we talk about something like healthcare, I'd be more apt to believe, oh, these are like organic conversations happening and they're being reframed. But I don't see in Black, white, any communities that I'm a part of where there's ongoing or even infrequent conversations about reparations. I don't see that.
Yeah, I can't speak to the communities you're part of, but I can speak to the communities I'm mine. Whereas reparations, because I live in a very rural area, or live in a very white area, I live in a very Republican area, conservative area, to be clear. Reparations is only brought up dismissively and derisively with the people I know. For the most part, there's exceptions. But what they do talk about a lot is injustice, inequality, both by class issues and, surprisingly, by race issues as well. There are a lot of conservative, very right-leaning people, Americans who absolutely care about Black issues and about the injustices around that. Now, their solutions are wildly different than perhaps you or I would be comfortable with, but they actually care about these issues.
I've talked more white conservatives into being okay with UBI than white liberals, which is also interesting. I meme about that a lot, but it's just true. Most times if I talk to a conservative, they will eventually concede into, yeah, UBI sounds kind of base. I don't like how much I perceive it might cost, but they come around. A lot of white liberals are like, no, there's just no way. We're never like, no, let's not do that. Which is interesting, but yeah, I meme about it.
It is interesting, but I say that to kind of say that reparations is a solution or a proposed solution to the issue. But because you rarely hear that specific solution talked about, doesn't mean they're not talking about the issue underlying it. And I think that absolutely we are having a national conversation about racial issues, and we have been for a very, very long time. And that has accelerated in the last 10, 15 years or so. There was a time in the 90s that we were, highs and lows, that we had solved it, so to speak, right? Advances had been made, and great advances in a lot of ways. A lot of the issues surrounding race in America had been removed. The knives that had been stabbed in had been taken out. Not all, but a lot. And so we were moving past it. We did not recognize that we were still bleeding. The knives have been removed, but there's still blood coming out. And so recently we've been more aware and recognize that more. And so we were talking about it more. So no, I disagree with you. I think that people absolutely are talking about the issues surrounding reparations. They may not mention reparations specifically, but they absolutely are talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, to be clear, what I was specifically talking about was your comment about
but
reparations itself.
No,
if we talk about
I see the disconnect.
Yeah, if we talk about current systemic issues, I don't see that as a conversation that's happening about reparations. We're talking about current injustices or things that have happened, like you said, since like the 60s or last 10 years or that time period. We're talking about injustices that exist there. That doesn't link to a conversation about reparations, though, or what reparations should be, who should get it, which reparation. That specifically is what I was saying is a fringe conversation.
I think it does link to it, though, because a lot of people will look at redlining, the crack epidemic, the Vietnam War, and the GI Bills not getting, and link that to the reason why people are suffering today and the injustices that exist today. This link happens all the time. And then I've heard, again, less so in the conservative areas, but when I live in less conservative areas, people bring up reparations. And
so I'm gonna throw your original conversation that started this back at you, right? Because you're saying that local conversations inform the national, right? And I was saying that that's not true. If we look at the national conversation about reparations, it's over slavery almost exclusively. If you look at the conversation that you're talking about, that are current systemic injustices or byproducts people believe came from slavery, which I agree, but those conversations over GI Bill reparations redlining aren't happening at the national level in the conversation about reparations, which kind of supports my point. The national congressional conversation over reparations is not at all linked to
because
the day-to-day conversations we're having.
The reason it's not included in the national conversation, because we're talking about like why it's not included, because we both agree it's not included.
No, but you said that you specifically said
and
that
they
may
just,
reframe.
if I may. So you stated that it's because politicians frame it purposefully. Politicians in the media frame it purposefully onto slavery and ignore these other things because they know it will be less likely to pass. And that's why we're having this discussion right now here, is because I fundamentally disagree with that. And I was using the fact that again, my argument is that they will talk about whatever people are talking about. And I was using the fact that they talk about that in that way because most people on the ground level, when they do talk about reparations, talk about it in that way. So it's not the result of them trying to drive this narrative to us. I'm thinking they are picking up on the narrative as they hear it from us. Does that make sense?
I thought you agreed that most people aren't talking about reparations for slavery. They're talking about current systemic issues and trying to fix issues of
they
today
tie
or the
it to
recent
slavery
past.
in their discussions. These current issues, when it comes to racial issues, slavery comes up because they will some egghead will obviously talk about it, right? It's the elephant in the room when it comes to any racial issue in America. Is the 400 years of, or yeah, about 400 years of slavery that we practiced ish. I could have my numbers wrong, sorry. But it's hundreds of years of slavery at least. And I think that like that's what, of course people talk about the source of it. Of course they do. Why wouldn't they?
I think you're tying two things together, and I'm trying to talk about them separately, and that's where we're missing each other. The conversation of reparations and the conversation of systemic injustices are two connected branches, but they're two different branches. The conversations that you're talking about that most people have may be around things about slavery, connecting those to things about redlining, connecting those to things about the GI Bill, and those like systemic factors of things that have gone wrong for Black people. But the conversation, and maybe we're in different circles, but the conversation I hear about reparations specifically, which ties to the national or congressional conversation about reparations, usually isn't about slavery. It's about those things that are more contemporary.
Yeah, this may just be a different circles thing, which is fine. Well, we are looping a bit on that, so let's
for sure.
hop off of it. Because it's tangential at the end of the day, to the overall issue as well. I wanted to first let my chatters know that if you like my content, right? It's not reparations, but it is a nice thing to do to give me money. Sub to the channel, throw some super chats my way if you have questions for our wonderful guests here, and I will try to read them out loud on the screen. So that would all be great. But let's discuss my other problems with reparations. So we talked about the pragmatic issue a lot. I brought up something during the Prime Kai panel that I'm curious what have a larger conversation with you on for the brief time I have you. I don't want to keep you all night, obviously. when we talk about cash reparation, Nick brought this up, and I largely agree that there are two forms this can take. Because money's coming from somewhere. We either print it, loan it to the banks, say cash inject, give it out directly. That creates inflation. Or you take the money from other social programs or other programs, doesn't have to be social programs, but other programs, military budget, somewhere we reallocate funds and we bring it towards this instead. And there are a lot of people who rely on a lot of those programs. So either way, whether it be inflation, which is going to hurt everyone that is making under a certain amount, or by less funding towards social programs, which primarily poor people take advantage of, what you were asking when it comes to the reparations is you were asking other communities to take a hit for this injustice to be paid. And I don't know, and I mean it when I don't know, right? I don't know if that in and itself is a justice. Talk about it with me.
Yeah, so we can talk about this two ways. One, to start this line of argumentation makes me wonder if you support reparations ever. Because when it comes to the government did a wrong and they're going to pay out to some people, whether that's Japanese Americans, whether that's Black people, whether that's Native Americans, this problem of this is a historic problem that happened and we're paying for it is always going to be there. That's not really related to the reparations that we're talking about today. It's just a byproduct of reparations themselves. So my first inkling is always this person doesn't support reparations ever, because that's always a problem. Where are we going to get the money to pay the people, right? And it's fine if you don't like reparations.
No,
but
so there, it's a matter of scale, though. When I think of this being a problem, like if it's under a certain amount, if you can do it for less than $1 billion or a couple $1 billion or even $50 billion or $100 billion, which it's funny to think of those as little amounts, but most reparations proposals that I read and hear aren't talking about billions. They're talking about trillions. And that's where these issues... So it's not the fact that, like, it's on a scale. And under a certain amount is much less of a problem for me than over certain amounts. So again, I'm talking about like I think it was 𝕊𝖐 who made a pretty comprehensive plan.
Ice Cube,
sorry.
It's fine.
I'm very white. Forgive me.
Yeah. Well, Ice Cube is a real... Ice-T is a real person too, but it was Ice Cube.
Fair enough. Ice Cube, and I read this, I think, last year, and I'm not sure that's when he proposed it, but that's when I read it. And it was quite comprehensive. It went through and outlined not only reasons why, but actual ways to implement it, etc. Very.
You do know something. Stuff. You do know something bad I'm going to bring up when you bring it up, right?
What are you going to...
He tried to meet with Democrats and Republicans, and the Democrats wouldn't talk to him, and Donald Trump did. Not to say Donald Trump was ever going to try to fix this problem, but it's telling that Joe Biden was like, yeah, I'll talk to you about that shit later, like after the election, which he also never did. But, you know, that's just a theme that I see where he wanted to present that contract that you like, contract with Black Americans. He wanted to present that to Democrats and Republicans and say, hey, we're going to see who bites and who wants to help Black people. And only the Republicans talk. But
separate conversation. Yeah, but we will talk about that if you'd like. I think that, but the reason I bring it up is because the price tag on that was a lot. If I'm recalling correctly, it was trillions. It's been a year since I've read it, so forgive me if I'm getting my numbers wrong. And that's quite the chunk of change. So if you were giving me if you handed me a proposal that said, okay, well, the victims of 9/11, we got 1,000 or 3,000 families affected by this. We're going to need about $50 billion. Then, okay, 50 billion is a lot of money, but it's nowhere near the scale, right? We're talking apples and oranges here. But when you talk about 14% of the nation and you say, hey, here's the bill for that, then I'm like, wait a second. And so it's not the fact that I don't ever support reparations. It's the scale of it that gives me pause, and looking at what will happen because of that, and kind of making some leaps after, like, okay, once we pay for this, say we do it through the cash injection, we have inflation to deal with, and we see the effects of inflation right now, right, on poor America,
For sure.
and how that's crushing them. And I don't know if that level of pain is fair to ask. But yeah.
Yeah. So I would say two things. One, there's a plethora of different reparations that I argue for. I think this conversation now hyper fixating on the one about slavery. I think if we talk about the GI Bill ones and the other ones, they're like billions of dollars for those vets.
Then
If we
a
talk
lot
about
of my
redlining, it gets
problems
bigger.
with them
But
go away. So I'm just to short circuit that. Yeah, if you can give me one that doesn't appreciably affect other people, or maybe even a smidgy little bit, okay, cool. This problem goes away.
I'm only bringing this up because it sneakily also supports my previous point on why the congressional conversation is where it is. But that's fine. No, but so if we do want to talk about just the slavery room, which is fine, I'm perfectly fine to do that. I think we have to answer the question on, do we support reparations, right? I say I support reparations because at the bottom, like the underpinning of that, isn't because I'm Black. It's because I'm interested in justice. So if we limit what reparations can be, what we're kind of agreeing to in a more flippant way is, well, if the government really fucks you over, we're not going to help you. If they fuck you over in something that, doesn't cause me any pain in my day, go ahead, write the check to the people. But if it's going to cause me harm, then I'm not going to support it. And what's at the bottom of reparations for me is justice. So when we talk about reparations for Native Americans or for any other group, I'm not really interested as much in those like financial details. Like obviously they'd be important and there'd be conversations over it, but that's less important than the conversation of justice. And I agree that this is the second topic, so you could say that that's the order that you're prioritizing them as well.
We can talk about the justice thing because I think it is tied together. Classical Johnson for $2, 𝕵𝖎𝖙 2024. Good luck with that, buddy. Good luck. I think that justice is an interesting thing. Is it justice when you are hurting one group to help another? I don't know if it is. I get that there was a wrong done. I get that there was a wrong done in the case of redlining or even the crack cocaine epidemic very recently. But again, as I said, if those are much smaller in scope, good on you, right? Like, I'm okay. But if we're talking about like anything surpassing, I think, and I'm just throwing a number out here because I'm not actually sure what the number would be, but anything over $1 trillion is something that I think, okay, now this is in a different world almost, and we have to look at this differently because the effects of this are going to be so much astronomically larger than someone who wants to pay out $50 billion to a group, right?
Yeah. Let's use a crude example, and I'm agreeing up front that this is rather crude, so it doesn't map on one-to-one. The concept that we have in justice in our like criminal justice system is one that, regardless of the harm that may come when somebody commits some evil, they need to pay for it, right? So let's say somebody murders somebody's mom, right? Well, the loss of that person as a free person is going to hurt people that are related to that person. And there's no getting back that person's mom. But there's a wrongdoing. And even though the mom of the murderer is going to be impacted by this person being sent to jail or whatever, we see that it's justice because there was a wrongdoing to this family and they lost some loved one, and the rectification of that is to place this other person in jail. So in our system of justice, there's always going to be people that are going to be negatively impacted by seeking that justice. Now, that's a rather crude example, but as that relates to this, there's going to be some people in the public that lose to right a previous wrong.
It is a crude example. I mean, the biggest answer is we don't put a murderer in jail just to punish him or just to assuage the loss or make up for the loss of those who were murdered, and the families of those who were murdered. We do it to keep him from doing more harm still. To stop him.
Yeah, but lawsuits, all of this is all the same
but
thing.
Yeah,
right?
It's crude.
If you sue a company, that's money that's coming out of their budget that could go towards other stuff. But you were treated unfairly. You were discriminated against for whatever reason, and they're taking money that could go to other people in that company, and they're giving it to you because of a wrongdoing. Now, people could argue, hey, I could have got more wages if they didn't have to pay this $8.9 billion lawsuit, right? But the argument is, hey, this company did something wrong, and yes, you're impacted by it because you're a part of that company, which I would say, yes, you're impacted by it because you're a part of our society or our country. I just like I would tell those people that, hey, I'm sorry you didn't get your wage because your company had to pay out money for a lawsuit. I would also say to those people in that group you're talking about, yes, you're a part of a country, and if that country did a wrongdoing, some of those things might negatively impact you.
There are two things, and they are different tracks that I want to say to this. And so I'm going to start with the more hot take track. And this sucks because it is often used incorrectly. But I think that in certain rare cases, that too big to fail, you remember that saying from 2008?
Oh, yeah.
Or
yes.
Too big to fail is a thing. And I think that once your wrongdoing passes a certain scale, where making up for that wrongdoing is going to be such a problem, then it becomes something we do have to take into consideration. For example, China, and this is crude, again, crude example.
Yeah.
China is doing some horrific things to its people. Horrific things. Justice would be to go in and stop them. But we don't. Why? We don't. Why?
I don't know.
We don't, because the harm of doing so, right? The impact of doing so is going to affect. Whereas we will go into smaller countries. We will go into smaller countries because we make that calculation that the harm done is going to be less. It's going to cost less. It's going to be less of an impact on the overall population. It's going to cost America less. And I think that matters. And it's bold to say it, but I think it's still true. Does that make sense?
I think that line is coherent, makes sense for sure. I think that there are other ideological reasons people could lay out, though. You could say that we are here to govern the U.S. and other places having their own set of laws and moral codes is up to that system, and not intervening is given that sovereign nation.
It's a crude example.
Yeah, no. But all I'm saying is that I could see the argument for not invading because we're giving other nations their ability to be sovereign without our control. And in certain situations, that's one that I honor. I don't like the idea of like Uyghur people being genocided. I'm not saying that this is a good example, but I'm just saying I can see the argument from a libertarian or something perspective that, hey, these other nations are their own sovereign nation, and the way that they govern doesn't relate to the.
Well, let's use an American. It's hard because a lot of these companies are international. They affect the world. Amazon has some shady business practices, right? I'm not a legal scholar, nor am I up to date on contract law. But for the sake of this discussion, let's just assume that they're guilty of what they're being charged with. I don't know if they are. Of being predatory, of hurting small businesses, of really devastating economies on the small scale. If we were to ask Amazon to shutter its doors or to take so much out of them that it would have a huge impact on them in order to right this wrong, I think that would be a bad thing to do. Because while, yes, there's an injustice that happened, holding that injustice to account is going to create a problem bigger, and that's going to be more
Loss of
widespread.
GDP, lots of things.
Lots of issues. So
And
again, when we talk about, to relate this back to the topic, when we talk about things in the trillions of dollars scale, that's some of the concerns that I think, again, we could address them if you could. Again, if I'm not an economist either
Mhm.
on this, but just intuitively, it's like, okay, well, now we can't weigh this with the same scale, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah, so I would say two things. One, I would be for investigating and tearing apart Amazon for those things that seem they were wrong for. Because, like I said, justice is at the bottom of my moral system. So I can't see myself construing not going down the path of justice. And I would say maybe there are certain things that we call shady business practice that Amazon does to put people out of competition, which aren't actually illegal. They're just competitive at scale, right? Like it's just law of having access to bulk, right? But in bypassing that though,
Yeah,
I would be
like
for
crude
tearing
examples all
apart.
around, right? But go ahead.
Yeah, I'd be for tearing apart Amazon in that case every time. But now to talk about the economic side, which I've been trying to leave this for last, I think there's multiple things that we can do. Like you mentioned, two of them. One of them is, hey, print the money, and I'm for this. Print the money, give it to people. The second one, figure out what programs we're going to alter, and then figure that out and give people a check. I'm also for that. The third one that I think is like trying to figure out what percentage of new GDP growth will we contribute to reparations so that it isn't impacting either one, those, it's not the first solution where it's like, hey, just print the money and hurt all of the people that are going to be hurt now. It's not two, it's not defunding something that currently exists. It's about new percentages of our GDP that are going to go towards taxes to go towards more stuff. So I would be in favor of all three of those. And I think the third solution would present less of the problems that you're talking about.
Sure. Like, again, on principle, I'm not against reparation, but in practice, it runs into a lot of problems that I think are on the scale of going into other countries to stop injustices happening there. Like, there are things that we unfortunately can't fix. We can never solve everything, and we do have to, as cold as this sounds, pick and choose our battles. Now, I know this plays into the fact that, well, white liberals just don't care about black issues enough, and I think that there is some fairness to that. I'm not saying that's totally out of pocket. I'm saying that why black issues and not insert other group here? Like
Because
Asian issues or
I would say I would return to an argument that you made earlier. Um, Black people are disproportionately represented in the um, groups of poverty or other negative connotations that we can put, whether it's certain types of crime or blah, blah, blah. They're disproportionately represented in this group due to either current or historical factors that were not within their control. So I would look at this group as being the preferential target for um, reparations because one, they make up the bigger pie of the groups that are disproportionately attached to negative labels, and also it wasn't their problem. It wasn't their fault in arriving there. So that would be my argument on why I would prioritize Black reparations over other groups.
oh, Mr. Gambit, it's been a pleasure talking today. I better understand. I hope you better
Cool,
understand mine. I
for
don't know
sure.
if I agree with you or not. It's something I have to think about more. I think that it's not an easy topic. There are so many variables at play, and there are so many things. Like, to say that we care about justice is a very simple thing to say, but it's a harder thing to do.
It's
And
harder to live up to it.
because there are, well, not only that, but
I'm joking.
Yeah, but that's true as well. But what is just in a situation gets very messy,
For sure.
especially on a scale like this. I'm going to say my closing thoughts, and then I'll let you have the last word.
Cool.
And gang, if you've been watching this and you're malding, and you want to talk to me, call in. You can say for those if you'd like. It's up to you.
Yeah. If somebody says that they have something specific,
sure.
I'll stay for a little bit. Otherwise, I'll be out.
When it comes to racial issues, we have to look at this through several lenses. Justice is important, but also important what we can accomplish. If we were to implement policy that targeted poor communities, most of those communities affected would be Black communities. And I think that in order to get this passed, this is probably the best way to go about it. When we look at policing issues, the Black people are brutalized disproportionately, but white people are also brutalized by the police. Policing is an issue for everyone, and so is poverty, so is injustice, so is all these things. And while I am sympathetic to the idea that there was a horrific wrongs throughout our history that have been done to different groups, Black people more so than most groups, I still go back to the old adage, politics is the art of the possible. I want what's possible. I'd rather have good enough than not at all. So that's my thoughts. Last thoughts for you, and then we'll open it up to callers.
Cool. Yeah. So one, I appreciate the conversation. It's pretty cool. What I said on the panel might have been a bit inflammatory, which I understood from the gate, but I'm happy that there are people like you who receive it and understand that that's the need for a further conversation and not dismiss it, right? So appreciate you being willing to talk through it. In closing, I'll just say, there's, as we've said here, there's multiple different reparations that I fight for. I think there are more contemporary things where the victims of those crimes are still alive. And I think a lot of the arguments against reparations for slavery don't necessarily work for all the other reparations that myself and lots of others argue for. I specifically think the national or the congressional conversation about reparations centers around the ones related to slavery because those are the most impossible. Yeah, and I think that the reason why I want to address this in a Black based way rather than a Black agnostic way is because I don't think there are policies that have been implemented in this country that were Black agnostic positively disproportionately affected Black people. So I think the track record on trying to address some of these historic wrongs to Black people in a race neutral way, in implementation of those policies, every time it's not done its stated goal, which was to disproportionately help Black people. So because of that, I want to see something that's specifically targeted to Black people so that those implementation details don't come around. But yeah, so yeah, if anybody has any very quick questions, I can stay for 10 minutes or so, but otherwise I'll be out, and I appreciate the conversation.
Of course. Gang, if you want to join the Discord, it's !Discord in chat. Click the link, accept the rules, and jump backstage. It's top of the Discord server. And once you're there, I'll pull you in and you can ask us whatever or just talk to us about what you thought of the conversation. Now is your time to shine, gang. So we'll give you a couple minutes, and if no one wants to call in, no one wants to call in. I understand. You guys are busy. I just looked at chat. I don't know what they're arguing about, but it ain't what we talking about. Oh, thank you for the gift sub, by the way. Why does Twitch TV hate me? Why does? Thank you for the gift sub. I really appreciate it.
I love I love White as Twitch hate.
White is a great guy. He's terrible in some ways, but he's good in general. Thank you again for another gift sub. 2 gift subs. Beautiful. Like, love to see it. Love to see it. Yeah, gang. What are you arguing about in chat? Anyway, what's going on?
Yeah, I see somebody was saying that reparation doesn't exist. Affirmative action didn't exist.
I don't know. I was talking to you, not my chat.
Yeah.
Oh, let me ask you this while we're waiting. So which is 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜 had a poll recently, and today I think he put it up, and I wanted to talk about it. Here's a question. Morally speaking, which is worse? Stealing from $100 from a very poor person, stealing $100 from a very rich person, is A worse? Is B worse? Are they the same? What's your thought?
I think stealing from the poor person is worse.
Why? I may ask.
Because I think the impact is important. And though I think you're committing the same crime and should be being charged the same sentence in those situations, I think that we can realize that the impact of it is different. And that impact is what I would say makes it worse.
Does impact affect the morality of an act? So, for example.
Oh yeah, from like a sin perspective, if we want to be a little bit religious in this, I think they're exactly the same. Only from like
I agree with you. That's my answer, and a lot of people disagree with me, and we argued a bit about it earlier, and that's why I wanted to get your take on it. I think that when we decide that it's okay to do a bad thing to a person because of X, Y, or Z, they make more money or it won't impact them enough, at least in really, really bad places. It's why the way of thinking, I guess, to kind of tangentially relate it back to racial issues, is the same way of thinking that it's okay to be racist towards a white person because they have systemic power. It doesn't affect them as much, etc., etc., etc. No, it's not okay. It's one of those things that people will say to justify their bad actions and say, well, it's less bad to do X, and so therefore it's conversely more okay to do X, is what that means at the end of the day. And so I'm probably going to have a show on this maybe Friday, but I wanted to talk about this in general. But I guess no one wants to call in today, so yes, thank you for being here.
Cool, no problem. Yeah, I specifically hate black people that say black people can't be racist. I don't hate them. I think they have disgusting arguments and it's stupid. And I think at least all of the negative things that me and you would probably completely agree on that topic.
Absolutely.
I don't like living on the same earth with people that believe that.
I don't want to cause harm to them. But
I don't want to cause harm to those people. But I just wish they would change the argument. But cool. We'll talk soon, man.
Okay. See you later, buddy. What a pleasant guy. What a pleasant conversation. I hope he enjoyed it. He seemed to. Yeah. I am curious, gang. What are you guys arguing about? Do you want to come in and argue it and make me money by arguing about it? You guys are really going at it. You guys are really engaged. Let's make me some money. Get me some cash. Let me monetize you, gang. Jump backstage. It'll be fun. Come on. Ninetail says her mic is broken again. Well, she should fix it. It's one of those things, right? That on the theft thing, on the question of theft, on the question of morality, a lot of people have what I call results-based thinking. Okay, where they base whether something is right or wrong based on whether or not it does harm. And while harm is absolutely, it can be and should be connected. And thank you for the gift sub, GSUGambit. Really appreciate it. Let me know if you upload on YouTube. I'll tweet it out. Oh, it's live on YouTube now. I might not edit it. We'll see what my editor wants to do. But yeah, thank you for coming. Hello.
Oh, heyo. I was just DMing GSU. I actually had a quick question for him before we shifted to the debate
Oh,
in
sure.
chat.
Yeah, GSU. Olive here has a question for you. So,
How's my mic, by the way? I
your
got a
mic
new
is
setup.
fine.
Very, very chill. Hi, Wick. Nice to
Hi.
talk to you.
Been a minute.
I know. Just to give people a TLDR in chat, we were fighting originally about the Civil War, and then it turned into how much the early American economy was essentially developed or air quotes built by slavery, and that was the kind of debate in chat. Hi, GSU. I had a quick question because I was
Mhm.
listening to y'all's debate, and one of the things that kept coming up for me is it seems I was wondering what models of, like, reparations you were looking at, because I think often what I see in the conversation around reparations is it's just sort of accepted that all models of reparations would look exactly the same, which is usually like the South African, reparations model, but that was very, like, uniquely a unique historical, situation at post-apartheid. So I'm wondering what you draw inspiration from or what you think the model would look like.
Okay, so just to make, I'm gonna regurgitate a little bit just to make sure I understand. You're saying that by South African model, I think you're saying paying with money, and you're
Um
saying that when it comes to reparations, which do I agree with paying with money versus a lot of the other more contemporary conversations that have happened?
um, yes. So, I mean, it wasn't just paying with money though, but it was, reconstructing the nation's economy because it had been, an apartheid state before, and there was massive seizure of assets as well and redistributions of those assets through the grief and reconciliations councils.
Hmm.
But one of the issues that I've always had with this model is while certainly it was effective in redistributing wealth. The way today it's undeniable that the racial and wealth disparities in South Africa are almost exacerbated. They're very extreme. It's some of the most
Hmm.
extreme globally. And so one of the things that I've always sort of had frustrations with in reparations discourses, we often just take for granted that's the effective model. But if we look at South Africa today, it hasn't worked. So I was wondering, like, if there's other models you look at or ways that you might want to do it differently than South Africa.
Yeah, and I do have some ignorance on the on everything that happened in South Africa when it comes to specifically the things that you've stated now, like
Mhm.
seizure of assets in order to redistribute.
Mhm.
I haven't ever advocated for that, and I don't
Right,
know
right,
if
right.
I would support something of that model. I'm much more a favor of the three options we kind of talked about, which is either printing money and causing temporary inflation,
Mm.
redistributing money that we use for existing things, or three, which I'm probably the biggest fan of. Well, actually, there's two more. One,
Mhm.
if we were to implement UBI, offsetting how much UBI goes to the affected group, or
Right.
four, talking about a percentage of new collected taxes that we put into programs related to reparations.
Okay,
So
so
those are kind of the four things that I argue for.
I hear today a lot of people who kind of want to avoid the wealth redistribution conversation, and they do tend to lean more towards like a services model. So I thought maybe that is what you were leaning for. But it sounds like you're kind of do you support all of these equally, or do you have a preferred model? Like if you today were in charge of bringing reparations policy to America, which one would you want to pick today?
Out of the four that I just gave you, or
Yeah.
are you including a fifth? Okay. Out of the four I gave you, I would be much more in favor of a modified UBI, but that's
Mm.
because I'm also a huge fan of UBI. So I think UBI
Right.
addresses a lot of problems with urbanization, and there's a whole bunch of other things that it affects. I specifically hate the current welfare state and means testing and the things that
Yeah.
that causes. So, but I would be the biggest in favor of a modified UBI because of my position on UBI and my position on reparations.
Interesting. Okay. I do want to say there's one model that I would like to introduce, and also Wick, then it kind of brings you back into the conversation because, what I was hearing at the beginning was your critique of um, uh, like the pragmatic ability for this to be passed, first of all, which I hear, how to actually build the political consensus around a policy such as this. And then also I do have certain critiques around the direct wealth transfers, like you were talking about, GSU. But there is a model which has been really interesting out of New Zealand, where the far left government partnered actually with the far right, because they have to build sort of its
Many
parliamentary
such cases. Go on.
yeah, as often seems to happen. It happens a lot in like parliamentary models. This also happens in Italy as well. But so in order to build the coalition to counter the neoliberal, hegemonic sort of policies or politicians, they formed a coalition, and the far left wanted to push reparations for the indigenous, and the far right obviously kind of its base of voters, I guess you'd say, would be rural farmers, and so they actually built a coalition that would have it wasn't direct wealth transfers, but it was land-based transfers on the basis that these groups would protect and restore the lands as well. But it ended up kind of being a wealth transfer because direct land transfers, obviously,
Yeah.
it was a lot of very productive lands, or in certain cases near the cities. And the indigenous groups have actually turned it into to like low-income housing, and of course the farmers have been able to integrate it into their productive cycles. And so it was a kind of interesting reparations combo, because working white people absolutely benefited from the reparations policy, but it was also still done on directly racial indigenous sovereignty lines. So it was
Gotcha.
both at the same time. You didn't have to pick, actually. It was happening at
Makes
both at the same
sense.
time.
Makes sense. Yeah. And I somewhat see my UBI position and modified UBI position as like a meld somewhat the same as like if me and Wick were trying to reach each other. Where I'm like, hey Wick, I agree with you that we need to do something about current um current poverty in all people, but I also believe that we should do something about historic reasons that Black people are disproportionately in the shape. So my advocation for modified UBI is kind of in that same vein of trying to reach more people that have a different opinion, with the hope that that thing, becomes more the political will.
Interesting. Wick, what do you think?
I don't know about the New Zealand position well
Yeah.
enough to have much of an opinion. If
Well, if I
it's
were to tell you
working,
today,
oh, go
like
ahead.
if I were to tell you, if you were to remove the political will problem that you had with reparations, and I were to say we could just take for granted, we could develop the political will because we had this buy-in by doing wealth transfers for poor working whites, whose lands were degraded by the state, as well. Would if we were to answer the political will problem, would you
Sure.
still have a problem with reparations
Not
along
as
racial
much of a
lines?
problem. There does come into an issue of like just racial based policies in general, but that's such a minor thing that the benefits of doing something like that would far outweigh any minor quibbles I might have, and so I'd be fine with it. And like I said, when it comes to compromise, if the only way I could get UBI is if Black people got a little more than me, or even a lot more than me, I'm still okay with that too, right? Like,
Awesome. Yeah.
See,
I'm
this is
still
this
okay
is
with
what I
that
find
too.
interesting, though, is like, I think a lot of the times the reparations conversation happens, and we feel like we have to pick like a racial analysis and a class-based analysis. But as well, of course, I don't know. I can't tell the long-term success of what's going to happen in New Zealand, and this is just one case study. But in this example, what we see is that both can happen at the same time, as policy often is compromises, and both groups can kind of work together and to achieve the same ends. And so we don't actually have to pick. Well, we in the terms of debate, in the pure sanitized environment of debate, certainly we can make arguments against racial based policies. But if we don't actually have to pick, I find that people don't actually have as much of a problem with it.
Well, yeah, certainly. I think that like when it comes down to policies, and we have to separate the policy from how people are advocating for the policy, and we can recognize the harms that some or the benefits some advocacy can have, because this works both ways, right? You can advocate for a bad thing in a good way, and you can advocate for a good thing in a bad way, and that does have an effect on the discourse. It does have an effect on people and people's lives, but the policy is a separate thing, and so we got to separate these things out.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'll stay in a little bit, but I do want to get some other people in. Just who had questions for GSU, but you can stay here. The People's Elbow. Do you
Wait,
want to come on and
I
talk?
know, yeah. Wait, GSU 2, one book that you might want to read is read The Shock Doctrine.
The
And
shock doctrine.
there's a chapter on South Africa, and it also sort of outlines how South Africa's reparations policy and state reformation actually may have failed. Why it failed? She kind of offers a reason why the Reconstruction failed. Um,
So just to make sure, it's the shock doctrine, the rise of disaster capitalism by Naomi
yes,
Klein. Okay,
yes,
cool.
yes.
I only listen to things on Google Play because I only do ebooks, and it's on there, so I'm buying it right now. I will
Very
listen
sure.
to it.
Yeah, and I think
Oh,
it gets into the real hard economic reasons of why it may have failed, and it's not just simply because of reparations, but it really starts to unpack those, I think, really difficult questions of reparations and what it might look like. But yeah,
Well,
the People's Elbow, what's up? Shit talking
he
from
got
chat,
a.
but
Apparently, they had their PC and peripherals and were lost in a lightning strike last week. So
oh, lightning
we'll
strike.
see
That's
that.
an incredible
But
excuse.
let me
well,
bring in Crawl the Wall. Maybe he has something.
576 pages. I will listen to it. I
You can
promise.
skip. I would recommend the intro, and then you can just skip to whichever like concept. The South Africa chapter is very interesting. I also think I always recommend everyone read the chapter on Russia, and it totally explains how we have Russia's very
I
predatory
bought the
situation today.
Yeah, oh, I'm so mad. I didn't buy the audiobook. I bought the regular book, the PDF. And now I
Oh
gotta buy the
no.
so I'm buying the audiobook now. It told me it was the audiobook and then it switched, which
Those
is disastrous. Yeah,
liars.
yeah, they just stole money from me.
Crawl the Wall. What you got for us? You got a question?
Hello, Crawl.
Speak now.
Oh.
Forever hold your peace.
Well, he's holding his peace.
Not muted. Not on my.
Yeah, I can't hear anything either.
Can't hear anything. Well,
Well, does
thank you.
anyone want to come in who I was shit talking in chat? Oh yeah, nice to talk to you, GSU. DM me whenever
Yeah,
if you
let's
want to
talk.
talk about it too. Hmm.
And any last invite for GSU questions? He's got things to do. He's a busy man. Don't keep him waiting.
Yeah, I definitely gotta go. I
Yeah,
want
I'll see
to.
you
Wait, it
later,
says
GS.
Carter Wall is talking. That's crazy. You may need to drag him out and then drag him back in.
Maybe.
He's lighting up in Discord. We just can't hear him.
Yeah, weird.
Okay, try again. Sorry, buddy.
Amazing. Sorry, buddy.
Okay, I'll see you later, GSU.
All right, talk soon, man. Thanks.
Bye, buddy. Okay. You guys were fighting with Olive in chat there. Come fight with her live on stage. Make me money. Was there anyone other than that doesn't have their stuff that lost to lightning that wants to argue about this? I wasn't watching chat. I'm gonna be real with you. Were you arguing with a lot of people, or was it just him?
Well, it was all over the place. I mean, I was actually arguing with Parallax first about the amount of conscription in the Civil War. And I think what I discovered the People's Elbow had a problem with was my use of language, which is that I stood by the statement, I was defending the claim that slavery built America, which admittedly that's a really kind of vague language, right? What does it mean to build something? It was awesome because he asked me literally or specifically what did it build? And I was like, okay, well, I mean, I am talking about a generalized economy situation. It's hard to say like what does it mean to like build an economy? But I think it's undeniable that like the value extracted from slavery was integral to the development of the early U.S. economy and specifically the South. Um, and it at times too. It immobilized the South even when that was taken away from them. The reconstruction of the economy was like really slow, and they were essentially forced dependence on the North at times, which was sort of the South's complaint was that they needed slavery to be economically independent. But eventually, they learned to do it without hurting people.
Sir
What do you think?
Leviticus says it's undeniable that they were a large portion of the economy, but to say that they were the majority is a nonsensical play on words. When you say this country was built on slavery, people were here for 150 years before the first slave showed up.
See, okay, this is the thing is at first I thought it was, I thought it was an interesting debate on what the actual like facts and figures of how valuable it was, but I was very disappointed to learn that this is just another semantic quarrel about people fighting with the use of the word built. And if we're gonna get into what facts and figures represent the word built,
Hello.
I'm oh hello.
Uh, uh,
I find that boring.
am I on,
You are,
Brooke?
but before you go, one question for Olive. Cake,
Mhm.
chocolate
She's too
cake
smart. I was gonna
under.
ask. I mean, 5 million slaves. I mean, that's a lot of people working for free. Isn't that that's almost a whole country in this age and time.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a
So why
lot
she?
of people.
So why she's saying they did not build this country? Of course, they built the majority of this
Wait,
country.
I'm on your side. Wait, what?
Oh, you're my side. I'm sorry. I thought you said uh,
No.
the
Keep telling me how I'm right. Go for it. Go for it.
no, no. I thought you said that slave did not contribute a big deal to building the United States. I think they did. I mean, actually, I mean, they carried the whole. It was 5 million at that time. 5 million was like 10 million, 20 million these days. In this day and
That
age.
I agree. That was the debate in chat. The issue is though it's
Yeah.
like, I'm interested in those numbers and how integral was how productive, so to say, which is a really fucked up word when you're talking about an enslaved group of people, but how productive was it? How integral was it to the production of the economy? And I think one of the other interesting things, I think when people hear the word built, they assume what I'm saying is that the US didn't exist before or
No,
wouldn't
yeah,
have
yeah,
existed otherwise, and obviously I'm not suggesting that either. So this is my problem is that it becomes very quickly a semantic argument, which is far less interesting
yeah.
to me. I can use a different word if that's going to make people spurred, but nonetheless,
Oh no, it's okay, but I mean, it's a triggering word. I mean, of that nature, especially to Black Americans. The reason I was going to call in Wick was the guy he suggested what UBI Universal what
A modified universal basic income, where black
we,
or
we already
black
have
people
it. We
specifically.
already have it. Just making people lazy. Welfare and food stamp. You don't need that. The best thing to do, not even give money. The best thing to do is free education for every Black individual in the United States. No interest on purchases of home to give them equity because blacks don't have equity. This is the problem. If you don't have equity in the United States, if you don't own land or houses, you have no wealth. You have no generational wealth. That's why the schools are bad because there's no taxes in that neighborhood. All projects and the real estate taxes that we pay for the school districts. You understand what I'm saying here, Wick?
So you would be against cash injections, like direct
Even
cash
cash,
injections?
you're gonna give cash to people. What is that? It's like a take getting high and it's over. They spend it in
Are you
Las
saying that
Vegas.
black people are going to use it to get high? They
No,
get
no,
the
but I'm
check.
saying you want to. No, you want to build generational wealth. I mean, you want to give them a leg up or a hand up. You want to give them education. You want to give them access to the housing market, like we had the GI Bill when people came back from World War II. Everybody got a house as easy as 1, 2, 3, while blacks were excluded. Blacks have the issue here. They don't have no equity. If you don't own anything, you don't. You're not anything in the United States. You understand what I'm saying, Wick? Does that make sense, or am
No,
I
it does. It
babbling?
does. In kind of programs that are in are targeted towards black communities, I think those are good. I'm not against
Yeah.
those in any
Oh,
way,
oh,
shape, or form. I think that
grants.
like grants to colleges,
Yeah. Sorry.
scholarships, a host of programs that we can mention that are specifically for Black Americans are a good thing. My issue
Yeah,
with
but
reparations specifically is cash injections of the amount and scale that I often hear about when we talk about
how much
specific.
cash you talking about?
Well, at least in the Contract for America, by Ice Cube, it was the total price tag was a couple trillion, I believe, 1.3 trillion, something like that. It was
So that's not
astronomical.
enough. They
You don't
would
think
get
that's
better.
enough?
No, they be. You don't need cash. They would be better off if you educate a whole class of people instead of giving them money in their pocket. Give them homes. Homes. They need to own property and feel they have a skin in the game.
I wonder.
If I'm able to migrate from a different country and own property and live the American dream,
I
Black
just.
Americans are excluded because I lived in black neighborhoods. They live in these big projects. They
Uh
have
huh.
no the school system is fucked up because there's no high. I pay about $7,000 in what is it called school tax in my neighborhood. That's a lot of money for a small town. So we have the best schools. So when you don't have a good real estate taxes in these community, it just keeps on beating up a beat up man. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I just wonder how many math classes I have to take for my power bill to get paid this month. Like, it's just not gonna fix something if they don't have a cash injection at all.
We're broke. We're gonna give you.
So you are for reparations extra? Welcome to the show, by the way.
I don't know. I have many complicated thoughts
Wait a
about
minute,
reparations.
how do you identify? Are you
highly-
black or white? If you haven't,
How do I identify? Well, thank
yeah,
you.
because
I'll leave that to your discretion, okay?
I
You
don't
tell
know, you
me if
look-
I'm black or white.
well, you look white with black features there, maybe.
I appreciate it. I have very complicated thoughts on reparations, and I just don't think I've thought about it enough to decide. But I'm very for UBI. So
You
Both
guys
sides
making
of the
people lazy. What, are you gonna keep people home?
Man, I'm
Is that-
okay with
right, yep.
people.
Okay, I gotta say, I hate UBI. I don't
Why?
understand.
Why?
Yeah,
Okay, why?
this is-
Okay, okay. This is a UBI
I know,
debate now. This is
Oh,
I've been
UBI
holding my
debate now.
tongue.
All
I've
right,
been
let's
holding
do
my
it.
tongue for so long. So I hate UBI for a number of reasons. It's actually funny because I'm not usually inflation is one of these things where everyone says they know how it works, and it's not actually as easy to ascertain what causes inflation. But I think undoubtedly a actual universal basic income would immediately cause massive inflation. Not to mention, I've always been quite suspicious. The people pushing UBI are, to me, some of the more kind of, frankly, predatory types who I think would
Am I a
absolutely
predator?
use it.
Damn.
Well, yeah, Wick is a predator for
Well,
sure.
true, fair enough.
Classic in all the DMs of all the fucking women on Twitch. We know this.
Wick is a serial killer.
No,
Don't
but
start
I'm
this fucking
talking about.
rumor.
I'm talking about, the people like running for president, like the people who cash in on this idea because they know a lot of people like it. But nonetheless, I absolutely think it would be used as a way to weasel out of more service and targeted projects. And I think the actual services, I think tethering this to productive outcomes is far more useful than straight up cash. I think this money would go straight into the hands of rent. I think it'd go right back to the rentier class. Cost of rent would cost of living would raise, and that money would be completely absorbed from the working class immediately. I think
it will evaporate. Go ahead. You're right. You're absolutely right.
But the problem here is that services and things like that leave out a whole host of people who don't live in cities. Like one of the reasons rural America is suffering right now is because of a lot of problems of poverty. They attempt to fix it through services, infrastructure, institutions, anything other than cash, right? And this leaves out large swaths of people in Appalachia and other towns and things.
I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you what's wrong with rural America. See, the big guy.
Wait, what's wrong with rural?
No. What's the problem? Why they're hurting themselves? Look at the song by this guy. What's his name? Oliver. What's his name? What do you mean?
Oliver North or whatever?
Yeah, I thought that was a revolution. When I first heard it, I said, thank God the whites are waking up and the poor, like we're going to have the Bacon Rebellion again of 1676. As soon as I get to the end of the song, he's making fun of people on welfare. He's attacking the other poor people. I said, what a fucking idiot. Go vote to the Republican and go die. And they're like, that's a fucking idiot. I was happy. When I first heard the song,
the fat shaming, the dude who wrote the song.
Yeah. I said, what are you doing? I was happy. I said, God damn, those poor whites, they wake up. Thank God we're going to vote together. We're going to get rid of the elites, the white elites and the political elites.
Hey, wait,
and
no,
help
man.
each other.
Let me back up my man.
And he turns around and makes fun of people.
Think of it this way. It's a metaphor. Think of this. He's talking about the metaphorically 300 pounds. It's not actual weight. He's not actually fat shaming. He's talking about the rich who are metaphorically eating
welfare. How about welfare?
No.
He said they're 300 pounds and on welfare.
He's not talking about. No. It's a metaphor. You guys, it's hella deep. This shit is hella deep. You don't understand. It was a metaphor for the rich who keep on getting richer.
You guys
clearly
you were throwing out this song about this dude who has pretty normie views because of a single couplet in the song.
No, but I'm a very critic of what's going on in the Midwest and the South. I think rural America needs to wake up and vote their own interests instead of their color. Every time they go to the poll, they vote their color. They give them some fucking critical race theory or the Willie Hordens. They give them these booby man, these ghosts, and they go vote for the same idiots every time. The fucking guy's freezing. What's his name? Mitch McConnell? He's freezing. He's like, we're going to call him Mr. Freeze. And they will vote him every single time.
Mitch McConnell.
No one claims Mitch McConnell. That man's a robot. I don't think.
Mitch
I know, but
McConnell's
they've been voted him all their life. You know, Kentucky has the 12 poorest counties in the United States, and they still vote for McConnell and Paul Rand every single time because
got-
the white
I got
Southerners
bad news
will
for
vote
you. Mitch
will vote
McConnell
their color.
represents his voters
Wait.
just fine.
Wait,
Huh?
hold up. But how does you went off on this tangent? I'm gonna reel it back.
Yeah.
You went off
No,
on this
I
tangent
wanna-
because Wick. I know Wick was saying something about protecting rural Americans, and you went
Yeah,
off.
we got
on
off
how
FBI
stupid they
so
are.
fast. I
Yeah.
don't know what
But,
all we're talking about. You guys are nuts.
I can't see your name. I don't know what to call you, but you are a very intellectual woman. I hear you. What I'm saying is that rural America has a lot of
White
How
issues.
girl?
smart for a woman. But go on.
No, she's very intellectual. I want to call her name. I don't know what to call her. She makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. She's smarter than all of us. Let's just say that. She's smarter than all of us in here.
It's that.
Okay.
You are a simp.
Simp
Well, what I'm
detective.
saying is that
Simp detective.
you don't know my views. You don't know my views. You don't know my views. I'm not a sim. Trust me. What I'm saying here is that when you go to rural
He hates
America,
women,
what's the
trust me.
problem? What's the problem? When the factories left, the fucking idiots just stayed. They drank themselves to death. Opiate came and killed their kids. They don't want to leave their towns to get new jobs or move to new cities or retrain a new job. If I lose my job in New York City, I'm a fucking immigrant who came here doesn't speak English. I would move the next day to Florida to look for another job. I'm not going to
Wait.
stay in Brooklyn and wait and die of alcoholism and drug use and become just casualties and numbers and forgotten. You understand what I'm saying here?
Christ Almighty. Okay,
Well, okay. Look, here's the thing.
that was an incoherent rant, is what that was.
Am I crazy, Wick? Wick, am I crazy, Wick?
Do you want me to answer the question honestly or nicely?
No, be honest. Am I making sense? Because you live in these woods. I know you. You're scared. You're the kind of guy who comes out in the
lot
dark
of the people
with a
who
pitchfork.
live here would get out if they could, but this is a self-perpetuating problem because in order to build wealth so that they can move, it becomes very, very hard when you're living in a rural area and people are so adverse to cash injection. People are so averse to direct cash and that because again, one of the things that people always want to do is solve things by programs and infrastructure, which are fine and dandy if you live in places that are getting those kinds of
I
programs.
think,
and we don't give because it's not cost effective to give rural Americans infrastructure programs. It's just not. There's not
That's
enough of us to justify the cost. And so, and thank you for the gifting 2 tier 1 gift subs.
Wick,
Kilo the
Wick,
Giant, look
Wick.
at you. Can't give
Here
me
we are
more
making
money.
you money, Wick.
Yeah, I am a
Wick,
rural American. Direct
Well,
cash
Wick-
injection to my
Well,
veins.
Wick is one of us. He's a Democrat. He's a liberal piece of shit like us. But listen, the whole idea is that rural America, they are proud of their towns and their heritage. They live there generation after generation. They don't want to move. They don't want to relearn something new. They don't want to chase factories.
Well, yeah, of course they don't want to move. There's a lot of reasons. Some of them do, some of them don't. There's a lot of
But what are
reasons.
you
There's
going to stay
history
there
right there.
and drink yourself to death and become just a wasteland of people wasted without any voice, without any like you say projects, nothing. They've forgotten people until the fucking guy Trump came and did the St. Patrick
That's a lot of the
thing.
reasons that there's a lot of Trump voter overlap and Bernie voter overlap. Right?
True.
Because they're speaking to the same crowd, the disaffected,
Yeah,
the people who
yeah.
have been left behind or feel that they have been left behind.
The
And
firmly anti-establishment.
that UBI, in addition to other programs through infrastructure to help more city-based folk, UBI is a good thing, and I think it's necessary in rural areas.
But
even if you
UBI
limit UBI
is
to
gonna-
locality,
no.
I think that
He's
might
gonna
be.
make him.
We do
he's
this
gonna
in
change.
Alaska, actually. You know,
UBI
Alaska has UBI.
Yeah, only 2,000 a year from oil, not from the government, because the government owns the
Yeah.
oil.
That's
Yeah,
how that's how they built consensus for extracting some of that
Yeah.
oil, though.
Yeah.
I think you're just gonna make them more lazier, more addictive to drug and alcohol. If you give them $1,000 a month, listen. Let me give you an example. How?
That's what you think.
No, hold on. Let me give you an example when they
I'm
vote
with
against
him,
their own
though.
interests. Hold on, just let me make
Might
this.
be what you think too.
I have this one.
Yeah, but
we had that.
he
We
said
had
I'm
that.
a genius.
Remember?
So.
You know,
You did say you're a genius.
You are a
You're a
genius. I'm serious.
genius woman, which is different.
Oh,
No, but genius women. She listen. They think I'm biased against women because I believe that women should stay in the home. That's why they get mad at me. Wick and all these guys.
This is your champion.
If I get
What
a
I'm
UBI, I will.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that a husband UBI. What I'm saying is that I remember Wick when they had that child credit, $300 for every child. That helped a lot of people in rural America, in West Virginia. Who was against it? and took it out of the bill.
Look,
Wait,
I'm not.
Wait, I don't. Which one? Tell us.
It's
The child credit that you get, they used to give last year. They used to give $300 to every child under
Sure.
18.
Like I'm with you on the fact that a lot of times
Who
the
took it
world
out?
Okay,
happens-
but who cut it? Who took it out of the bill?
We don't know.
Republicans, of course. What do you mean you don't know? It was
Yeah,
Manchin and his
probably.
group. They cut it, and Manchin is from the poorest state in the union, and he still took it out. And that money was helping a lot of West Virginians. If you have 3 kids and you got $900 a month, that's a lot of money. You could put
Wait,
food on the table. You could
Isn't
get
Joe
that shit.
Manchin? I thought
He's
Joe
a
Manchin
Democrat.
was Democrat.
No,
He's a
he just he's in name only. He doesn't know what he is. He's like he's
Okay,
one of,
that's true.
He's
But
a
he's
Democrat.
technically a
he
Democrat.
changes. He's non-binary. Every day he changes his pronouns.
Non-binary.
He's gonna lose to this guy
politician.
Justice. He's gonna get out this year. That
He's
guy,
not
the
gonna
governor.
lose.
He's gonna lose. Trust me.
He's
He
not
look.
gonna lose.
He's 6. Are you from West Virginia?
No, but Joe Manchin's very popular. He
Oh.
rose in popularity because of all these things he's been doing. Are you do you not understand how politics works? If you get voted in and you
Look at
do
the
things that
polls.
your consensus
Go look at the
voters
polls.
want
Go
you to
look-
do, then
He's
you get voted in
down.
again. It's pretty simple.
This guy's
Cool,
down in
it's
the
just too
polls.
big for
He's
your
down.
brain.
He's down in the polls by 20 points or 30 points. Are you
Joe
following the
Manchin
polls?
is doing just fine, and he's gonna
Let's
get
bet.
reelected
Wick, you want
just
to bet?
fine.
Okay, let's me and you bet. We'll give $500
Yeah,
to
put a
Wick's
bet.
channel.
Oh.
If Joe Manchin wins,
$500.
if Joe Manchin wins, I'm
I'm
gonna give
down.
$500 to Wick's channel. If
Do
not,
it.
if he lose, but you gotta keep your word.
Yeah.
Everyone here
Understand?
saw it. Everyone here sees it, and it's holding you to that empowered.
I
He's a-
will
he's
be
an
more
idiot.
than happy to make a
He
much more
hurt West
reasonable bet.
Virginians. West Virginians were getting. You know how
No,
welfare
don't cut me
started.
out of money. $500 is a reasonable
Yeah.
bet.
No.
Extra,
I'm not
what are you
doing the
putting
other
down?
half of that bet.
Okay,
I don't
but,
have 500 to fucking
You don't
throw
have to
around.
match.
like
It
that.
doesn't have to be a clean match. What are you gonna?
What's
what
the
are you
name?
gonna put up, though?
What's the name of this lady? What's your name?
Me, I'm Olive.
Olive.
Mm-hmm.
You are a very intelligent woman. I could give you that. You're very well spoken, and I really respect that. And we're nothing next to you. It is 3 of us here. We're nothing next to you, because I love the way you articulate your thinking. See, I can't do that. My brain just goes zzz, and I start talking, and my accents come out, and my speech impairments come out, and I'll just go crazy. What
You're
I'm
just being
saying is
nice
that
because we agree, though. So
yeah,
you
no,
taste
but
the
I do agree
dust
with
of
you.
the
No,
ground
no,
he's
but
walking on?
listen.
you just like me because I agree with you.
You know how the first warfare came to be when John F. Kennedy visited West Virginia. He saw how poor West Virginia was. He could not believe it, and the first thing he did was sign the SNAP, what is now SNAP, into law. The first family to get welfare was $70 to a family in West Virginia. The whole idea is $300 for each child in West Virginia. That's a lot of money for these people there. They don't have the same rents as I have in New York, or the same
Wait,
living
so
costs
you're
and anything
for
like that.
cash injection?
No, to help the poor, for kids. Don't you want to help kids?
With
Wait,
I
cash
also
injections?
am for cash injection to help the poor. That's what you
No,
do.
He
I
said
don't want.
Not
this
the
is,
opioid addicts.
no, that's what I'm talking about. The children to eat. The children to eat.
Just the
because-
babies.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't-
They're not
$300.
addicted to opiates yet.
Yeah, you know what, opiate? You know how bad it is.
But if we give them money, then they'll just buy water
Olive,
bottles, empty them out, and trade them in for the deposit.
Olive, if you saw the movie 𝕾𝖎𝖎, what was it called? How Purdue farmer and the Sackler family deliberately introduced opiate to these poor states because they work with their hands, they have a lot of pain, and they addicted a whole region. They probably killed maybe 600,000 people.
Yeah.
They didn't do
Oh yeah, here
nothing
we
to
go.
them.
Now we're on Big
Why
Pharma.
why
Wow.
is El Chapo?
Jesus
Why?
Christ.
Hold on. Why is El Chapo in jail and the Sackler family are not in jail? I bet you the
Free
Sackler
El
family.
Chapo.
The Sackler family killed more people than the fucking idiot, that little Mexican Chapo who probably running around doing nothing. I want
The
to see the
manufacturers of the drugs, they should go to jail. That's what you're saying, yeah?
Purdue
Gotcha.
farmer deliberately introduced these
No, he's
opiate,
right.
to these regions on purpose, because people in these regions work with their hands. They have a lot of pain. They don't work with their heads.
But wait,
So
Howard-
introducing a pain-relieving drug to a pained population means
Yeah.
you should go to jail. I got it.
Gotta be
Well,
addicted.
no,
What's
I
wrong
mean-
with you? You know how many people die? 200 people die a year. A
They-
day.
Oh yeah,
found-
it's a big problem. Don't
They
get me
found there was
wrong.
massive incentives for absolutely overprescribing.
Go look at that
and-
movie, 𝕾𝖎𝖎. It's called 𝕾𝖎𝖎.
And the
or something.
manufacturers, they prescribe
Huh?
the drugs, right? That's the manufacturers.
The manufacturers created incentives for the doctors to
On
overprescribe.
purpose.
Yeah.
They just build them like what, $10 billion to pay in penalties.
Yeah.
So if I tell you I'm
it's
going to
been
give you
found.
$10,000 to kill somebody, I Like, who gets it? I don't
Yeah.
understand the
No,
problem
No,
here.
the people who killed someone obviously are did
This
the
is the
primary
problem
crime.
we
But
have.
if you
Wick,
pay someone to kill
Oh,
someone,
okay.
yes, you
Wick, look,
committed a crime as well.
Okay.
Olive,
So if I
you
do
can't
something that is
Olive,
otherwise legal,
Olive,
and then
sweetheart,
you
don't waste your time. You can't
excessively
help
do it,
me. See, he's defending the people who are killing them. How are you gonna win with these people?
no,
Let
I'm
him die.
defending
Okay,
sanity, you
give
insane
it a minute.
person.
Let extra here. Let extra here have his
Yeah,
say.
let's
Oh, his name is
Let's
Extra.
just real quick. Let's give extra some space. Okay, he needs
The
a little
empowered
extra
man.
space. Well, let's give him some space to get his thought out. Extra,
Yeah.
the floor is yours, and then you two can respond. You little gremlins, you. Go ahead.
I don't
Extra.
even know what to respond to at this point. We've
Go
jumped from
Hawks.
Pick a
topic
thing.
to
Pick a thing.
topic.
Don't waste your
Oh, we're talking
time.
about the South. We're talking about the Midwest and their problems, right? The opioid
The
crisis is
South
killing their
and the
kids.
Midwest, the two like geographically different places, but you said both of them.
Where
Like, what do you
rural,
want me to say?
wherever rural America is, that's where the problem is. We're talking about the opioid crisis
Mhm.
and the economic crisis. You go to certain, they still have ringworms in fucking Alabama. That's third world diseases. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, it's
What do
Wait,
you
bad.
I'm
uh,
confused
Do
though.
you
Wait,
want me to defend that,
huh?
or like what do you want? What do you
You
want from
can't.
me?
Well, you're defending
Oh,
Purdue
I can't defend it.
Pharma.
It's impossible. It's something completely out of the world that somebody could come up with a defense for it. So that's
Just
how
defended it. You
dug
just
in
said,
you are.
we're gonna blame people for getting addicted. Of course, you're gonna blame them. They introduced it. People didn't know that they were gonna be addicted like that.
No, what you said was El Chapo is in jail, but these manufacturers aren't.
Statler family probably contributed to the death of maybe 400,000 Americans if you really study it.
Contributing to a death and being El Chapo are very different things. Did you know
Chapo should
that?
be free. He should be a good man. He should be released to his homeland. And he should be a hero. If you leave the Sackler family not going to jail, then this guy. I mean, what is it about Mexicans and color? Oh, because they're Jewish and white, they're not going to go to jail. Or what is the problem here?
Jewish and white.
Yeah.
Jesus, what have we come to? So we've now gone big pharma, Jewish people, white
So what was
people,
it, Purdue, the
UBI.
Sackler
Like,
family,
how many different topics do we need
the
to jump to? Can you
Sackler
focus on one
family.
thing?
Listen. The Sackler family are a very elite family. They donate to museums. They
Yep, the big
donate
elites.
to
Let me hear all
yeah.
about the big elites.
That's what they were doing. They return all their donation. They had these hospital wings named after them. They had in France the 𝕾𝖍, whatever the museum. They had these places named after them. At the
The
same
evil big
time,
elite.
hold on. They were donating this money to
Hold on.
culture.
I should hold on.
They were killing these poor kids in fucking Kentucky and West Virginia and
Just
Iowa.
slaughtering them. Absolutely slaughtering them. Yep.
So you don't believe that the 200 kids die a day in these areas? You don't believe that?
No,
Don't you think
no. You said that these big elites, are killing them. And I
they
wonder if you know like
am
what
I
gun they
speaking in
use,
English here?
or
Am I
Just say
speaking
you
in
got
English?
they use a katana or something.
Omar. I understand. I understand. Okay, but I
Can you
I can't
translate?
understand. What I can't
Wait,
understand.
can you translate what I'm
Stop.
saying?
I can't understand
Okay.
what Extra is saying. So you have to let Extra speak so I can understand and follow the conversation. Because if I can't understand what he's saying, odds are my audience can't either. So you got to give him some space to actually say it. And then you can yell at him if you'd like. But
Olive is number one. Good.
let me ask you directly, Extra. Do you not
Yes.
think that the pharmaceutical companies bear responsibility towards the deaths that have been happening in rural communities, specifically due to the opioid epidemic, overprescriptions at all? And if you do or do not, what level of culpability should they have? Go.
They almost certainly have some level of culpability. As has been pointed out, like there's been this epidemic that's been caused in this country, and in part due to overprescribing of opioids and not having good programs for getting people off of them when they need to. But that does not mean that we should just hang them out to dry immediately. They just need to go to prison, and they should be treated the same way as El Chapo. I think that comparison is so worlds apart that
You
it's
see
completely. Shut the fuck up for a second. I think
all right,
it's so worlds apart that I think it's a completely ridiculous, like almost contradictory statement at that point to compare
okay.
El Chapo to these executives or
I,
these people.
I think El Chapo is more innocent of those people dying, and these are than the fucking Sackler family. And go see the movie Dope Sick. They wrote about how Purdue introduced these drugs to these areas on purpose, and they knew they were addicting. The more they got addicted, the more they increased the dosages. And people, you go, your knees hurting you. They give you this drug, then you become an addict. Your back is hurting. Let me give you an example of me. Okay, this is the honest truth. I went to I needed a anti-nerve drug, right? But they say I have to see a psychiatrist for it. There's nothing wrong with me. I mean, I went to the psychiatrist. I swear to God, and you know what she did? She prescribed another drug. So you know what? When I got home, what I did? I went to the bathroom, opened the toilet, threw all of them in the toilet, and flushed them. You understand? Before I become a fucking slave to these medication. This is how people get addicted. And I told Wick what happened when I was in the hospital, and they told me, "What's your pain level from 1 to 10?" I said, you want morphine or Tylenol?" I said, "Morphine?" In my head, let me try morphine. Shit, everybody talks about it. That's the devil in me. I said it's a 9. She gave me morphine. I was high for almost 10 hours. She comes again. "What do you want, Tylenol or morphine?" I said, "I'm in pain. Give me more morphine." Then when I saw I was going to become addicted and I own business, I said, when I leave the hospital, then I'm going to be a drug addict in the corner chasing drug dealers for
You're turning
for heroin.
tricks on the street just to chase
Yeah,
the
no, I had
dragon.
businesses. And I saw people that, and I forced myself not, with 2 dosages, I swear to God, Wick, I was in a lot of, my chest felt like it was caving
The
in.
morphine CEO did this. To
The withdrawal was so strong just from 2 dosages. Imagine these people, they've been for these years. The medical establishment, and especially the big pharma, bear big responsibility in the introduction of opioid in certain area of this country, especially in rural America.
Yeah,
Full
chat.
stop.
So first of all, 𝕑𝖐? When did he say that? Did I miss something? 𝕑𝖐 is saying you're blaming the Jews. Are you blaming the Jews?
I didn't say that. I said the Sackler family. How come they're not in jail? Maybe because they're
Because
elites.
they're white and Jewish.
Maybe I said. I mean, why is the Mexican in jail doing time? That short poor guy. Why these people killed more people than Sackler did? I didn't say nothing wrong. I'm not. God damn, there's a fucking fly here, Bob. You
Fair
understand?
enough, gang. Fair enough. Well, do we have any other thoughts on this? Otherwise, I'm.
Where's Olive? I want to hear Olive more. Olive, what are you? Yeah,
Well, it sounds like Wick is trying to wind things down.
I mean, look, unless we got something of substance that we can like dig into.
what are we talking?
Well, I want
I would
something
have
of
loved to dig
substance.
into substance. I would have loved to, Wick.
Because I want to understand why you're against UBI, Olive. So from what I heard, you think that it's going to just simply be siphoned off to the renter class, the landlord class.
Yeah.
And it's going to just raise prices overall. Do you also oppose minimum wage increases for the same reason? Why or why not?
No, I mean minimum wage is, has to do with actual labor exchange and the idea that the actual absolute, floor should be related to the actual cost of living, right? Because if working full-time wage should be able to produce the cost of living. It's not the same kind of wealth transfer as a direct and universal wealth transfer, right? Which hypothetically anyone could opt into. And the idea that like the problem with this as a wealth transfer is it's so diffuse and it doesn't really do anything to actually address the economic structures, right? Because the problem is that we have a bad structure. I think sometimes when we get into class analysis, we think what things would be solved if poor people just had more money. But the issue is that the entire way that the economy is structured is that of extraction, right? And so that certain people fall through the cracks, right? Whether through bad choices or through hardships that they couldn't control. It's really easy to fall through the cracks, and no one's there. There's no safety net to catch you and bring you right back up, right? So when you're in extreme, economic disparity, or you're absolutely impoverished, right? Those are the people more likely to be, fall into drug use, drug habits, fall into extreme like cyclical poverty. So the issue though is like simply paying everyone to be alive can just be absorbed by the rentier class, which is already built. This is why for me, if we were actually have some radical wealth transfers in this country, I think it would look the form of like land redistribution, land transfers to specific groups. Yeah. Well, I mean, equity is definitely a word. It's definitely become a buzzword as well. I think a lot of the lands that have fallen into disrepair do happen to be in areas where there's low income people, and of course there's also like it's more likely people of color. Though certain areas are more likely to be sort of and face certain environmental injustices. And so for me, radical wealth redistribution would look like environmental justice. So it's targeted, it's land based, but it's not this direct cash in hand, which I think there's a lot of problems with that. I mean, I don't necessarily like have the same shame for people trapped in the opioid crisis, but at the same time, yeah, handing a crackhead $2,000 a month is not a good idea.
Just you're gonna kill him.
Yeah, you
That-
are gonna kill them. I mean, that's
yeah.
actually that's become the problem in cities like Portland. You can't actually just hand homeless people $20 anymore because they can buy so much fucking fentanyl they can kill themselves. So the problem is wealth transfers just do not make sense with the opioid crisis. We have to look at targeted solutions. The problems is services. There's so much distrust around services, and the reason we even got on this tangent in the first place is because Wick brought up that services don't necessarily penetrate rural areas. So there becomes a inequity to the rural areas where they don't necessarily get this wealth redistribution. This is why I'm really interested in land-based reparations focused on environmental justice outcomes, and also too the environmental justice. We all benefit, right, when we restore the environment, right? Like climate change stuff. That's really it's really trendy. It really captures people's imagination, but it actually also is productive, right? You can produce things when the lands aren't completely
But
soiled.
it's so indirect. It's very
She's so
indirect
smart.
when
She's
it
smart.
comes
It
She's
is
so smart.
indirect.
Well,
and
well,
it becomes almost so kind of um so removed from the impact, and also the time differences between those impact are
Yeah, I agree.
it can be
Yeah, they have.
generational in a lot of
Well,
cases.
well,
yeah.
who? Well, here's the other question. Then who is actually going to do the land restoring? Well, if we were actually have such a really intense labor project in this country, there would be the need for labor. So we'd have an incredible need for the works core, right? So like this has happened in the past when we had major constructive projects across the U.S. Is there was an incredible investment in labor. There's a lot of environmental projects that really need labor right now all along the West Coast. Every summer, it lights up in flames, right, because of
Yep.
the seasonal fires. Firefighters, we need firefighters. Like they're being paid so much each season because it's really really difficult work. That's
For what it's
obviously
worth, we activate National Guard a lot for it too. I live on the West Coast. I have a lot of experience with
yeah,
it.
true.
Lactoid,
I
come
mean,
fight her if you want to fight her. Stop talking shit in
what's
chat, gang.
You,
Stop
you
talking
know,
shit in chat.
Wick.
Come
I was
on the show.
I was no, he's right. I was getting away with pushing communist propaganda dressed up as
You know,
non-communist ideas. He's not wrong.
Olive is absolutely right. First of all, she's smart as usual.
I
Second
disagree.
of all,
But go on.
no, hold on, hold on, Wick.
Not that
What-
she's not
they have,
smart. I don't disagree with that. I disagree
Yeah.
with these solutions. But go
They
on.
have this saying. I think they said if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for one day. But if you teach him how to fish, then he'll learn how to feed himself every day. That's what we need. You know, Scanton. What's that? Is it Scanton? What is it? Is it Delaware? Was it
Branson, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Yeah, Scanton. You know, there's some houses for 10,000, 15,000. They just need the renovations.
They don't just
Michigan.
need renovations. They are pretty torn up houses if you're getting
Yeah,
that.
in Michigan, there were houses for 2,000, 10,000 about 7 years ago, 6 years ago, 5,000 houses because people just left because the auto industry left. You could give that to the poor. You could fix them and renovate them. Hey, here's your reparation. Take this house.
This is the
Here's this.
problem with it, is that without like some community infrastructure to back that up, no one wants to live there, and rightly so. There's all sorts of things that go into living in a community that need to be addressed that just aren't in very rural areas, and it's a real problem, and it's something that happens. So let me talk about this kind of like land reparation type of concept. We did this with the Native Americans, sort of, when we talk about the reservations. And would you say, Olive, that the reservations are in a good
That's
place?
like the opposite. Yeah, that's the opposite.
Yeah.
We gave them the worst lands.
Yeah,
I
it's
just,
interesting.
well, that's kind of my
what you're talking
point,
about too, though,
is
isn't it?
I don't see...
But that's the exact opposite of what I'm saying. I mean, we intentionally gave them the worst fucking lands because we thought that they weren't using the lands correctly. And so we gave them the worst lands because we were like, well, they're not farming, they're not doing, well, some are obviously, but they're like, overall they're doing low productive behavior, so we need to give them the most unproductive lands.
Which-
This would be the exact
reservations-
opposite.
And reservations were almost certainly
and
a
when they
part-
had the
one
good
second.
land, what did we do? The Trail of Tears, right? We chased them out.
Yeah, and almost certainly reservations in
different ways.
part were instituted as part of a genocide, not as like a good thing for them. It was almost certainly in furtherance of it.
Yeah, so it's a land policy, but it's not at all the same, right? Because we're talking about environmental outcomes, like environmental justice outcomes. You wouldn't be able to get away with some of the shit
You
they
keep
pulled
saying
during the reservations.
environmental justice. Can you give me a specific example of what that looks like, so I can maybe crunch into
Also,
it
I
a
wanted
little?
to say hi to infallible foul.
Yeah. Hello.
Hey,
Slips
how's
in
it
here.
going?
Environmental justice is like technically it's like a sort of subfield of study. It's obviously a buzzword, so I don't want to give it too much credit. The idea being that, when we protect lands, we do so along sort of social lines. And so you can have both, just restoration projects, you can have just recoveries, you can have just projects, right? So like we can imagine, right, when we send the National Guard because a forest fire is just burning absolutely out of control, we all understand that's a kind of environmental justice that otherwise it could just potentially spin out of control and burn through a suburb, right? The problem is you also have environmental injustices. I would say the reservations was an environmental injustice where we are quarantining the indigenous to some of the most impoverished, unproductive lands, right? We were specifically tethering their racial identity to not unprotected, unproductive lands. Similar things have happened in the U.S. I mean, for example, one of classic examples of an environmental justice is some of the massive floodings. I mean, recently the floodings in New Orleans, right? But one of the problems when some of these floodings happen in predominantly Black neighborhoods, there's suddenly magically less interest in restoring some of these projects, right? So that would be an example of an environmental injustice. It doesn't always happen like this, but it does happen often along these lines. So the idea being that we need to take interest in all of the lands. We need to, and taking interest in restoring lands can be a way of wealth transfer. I think I agree, Wick, it's indirect. I don't think it's completely sufficient for the immediate crisis we find ourselves in. But I personally find this just more of a long-term solution rather than
I'm not
a cash in hand.
I'm not against
Um,
improving different areas, right? I'm not against improving renovating communities that have been victims of disasters or
Yes.
with crumbling infrastructure. I think infrastructure projects are good. My concern is I think that's a different problem than the one that is faced today by a lot of struggling people, both inside the cities and outside the cities, where even these infrastructure projects and these programs that happen within cities are they are not able, for whatever reason, to achieve access to them sufficiently for it to actually be beneficial and help. And we keep trying these different projects, and we keep going through this kind of bureaucratic red tape and things like that, and it's just not solving the issue. So the reason I would argue for UBI is because it's going, and while yes, there might be problems with it getting siphoned off or drug addicts spending it on beer or getting high or whatever.
Well, then not spending it on beer, spending it on drugs.
Or yeah, on hard drugs like cocaine, on the hardest
on fentanyl,
drugs, on
right?
ground up baby bones that they make from
You
baby
can
bones.
afford a 10-day high with just $5 now.
And that's a problem. But I think that there are many other poor, impoverished individuals. I'm not talking about like just those in extreme poverty either. Someone making 30K
But what about
to 40K a year are going to be massively benefited by
but that's a secondary problem.
Month.
The primary issue with UBI, though, the secondary issue is, of course, it would just go into massively inflating the drug issues that we have. That's a secondary auxiliary problem. The primary problem would be that it would be immediately absorbed by the rentier class.
That's the part that I probably disagree on the rentier class part. I think that's true to a degree, but obviously, like markets go off of supply and demand, right? The only additional demand that could be created is from homeless people getting homes, immigration, or people no longer living with roommates, right? So there's the potential that the people no longer living with roommates increase demand by a bit, and I'm not sure exactly what the statistics on that are. Obviously, I think in general prices would increase as well, but I don't think they would increase to the point where those people couldn't afford homes, right? Because otherwise they'd be homeless and no longer contributing to the.
You just named more reasons
society.
why it would be immediately absorbed by the rentier class, because now there would be increased demand, and the rentier class now knows there's more money. I mean,
This
frankly,
sounds like an
so
argument
I
against
own
minimum wage. Like
But,
my
yeah,
problem with this is
well-
this sounds like an argument against any social program
Well-
such as minimum wage,
It's not,
welfare,
though.
etc. Because it's the same arguments against those things.
No, because when
happen,
it could
right?
no, it's
So-
not though, because with minimum wage, that only impacts a small section of the economy who's actually at the minimum line. When you're talking about a universal basic income, every person, like, look, as a landowner myself, as an apartment owner myself, I now know no matter what, the person I'm renting to has an extra $2,000 a month. You think I'm going to feel bad about raising the rent as much as I can? No,
But you
I'm
might
not.
feel bad when
But-
you can't compete in the market.
Yeah,
I
the
would be
main
able to
thing is
compete because everyone would have $2,000 more a month.
No,
I would
no,
be
no,
able
no,
to
no.
absorb
The-
that immediately.
You wouldn't
Rural-
necessarily be able to compete with someone who also is dropping their price to get someone into an apartment.
Well,
that
no,
they
but
wanna
as
rent out.
TK
No.
just mentioned, now more people can afford housing. There's going to be
Yes.
a lot more pressure on the housing
Yeah,
market,
he was
and so
steel manning you.
yeah,
No,
I know.
not
I'm just saying that
fully.
adds more reasons
Yeah.
why I wouldn't have to have some of the
But
competitive issues. There would
what
be
I'm-
more pressure on the market, which benefits me again.
What I'm saying is, while I agree with that portion, I think the other portion is more important. So people say we have like $2,000, $3,000 like a month, right? Right now, apartment needs are mostly based in cities. I actually think that with this sort of program, it actually makes land in rural areas more usable, because now the people getting paid in rural areas, it doesn't matter that they're getting paid that much less. Like, a home is still going to be comparatively that much cheaper due to the decreased demand there. So I think it would also incentivize supply to a degree that this would kind of be a non-issue. Now, I agree that
Why
prices
can't
would
we
increase
just build
in general.
supply? Why, if
I-
we think it's a supply side problem with housing, but why don't we just focus on
Because there's
building
no
houses?
demand in those places, because someone can't move to random middle of nowhere place and afford to still live there. If you had UBI, they can afford to, like, say, get a mortgage on like a couple acre place and build a home on it, right? And that's considerably cheaper, but your city people who are already poor can't do that today.
Well, okay, but first of all, that's potentially true, but
Thank
we
you.
don't. I think, but we don't know it's true, so we can't rely on it. It's certainly possible.
Defeated by fact.
I
It's
agree
certainly
that we
possible. I also
Yes.
don't necessarily think. I think disastrous things have happened to the American housing economy, specifically because we incentivized suburban development. So I don't necessarily think it's a good thing that it's possible people would take their universal basic income and go build land in a rural area. I think
Well-
this has been one of our problems, is that the unique suburbanization of American development is a huge loss, because essentially the people who represent some of the most, like, the best people to tax leave the cities. They go to other cities that have competitively lower tax
But-
rates, despite working in the
well,
cities.
But the reason
or having
kind
some
of-
of the
but for
benefits
the
of the
they
most
cities.
part-
moved, just real quick, I want to address this, because the reason they moved is because they can afford it. When you make it so that everyone can afford it,
No, they moved because
It
they want the
get-
lower
it gets
tax
much
rate of
more.
the suburbs, despite
Because
having some
it's
of the
cheaper.
benefits of the nearby city. America, we are the way our
That's
urban
pretty
sort of.
reductionist.
It's not actually. It's a huge
That's
problem.
pretty
with
reductionist.
It's not. But
You're saying the only reason people move to different areas is because of my argument. That's very reductionist. The people move for a plethora of reasons, one of which might be what you're talking about. Let's not narrow the entire scope of everything
Yeah.
in the world down to your argument.
Okay, well, okay, a handful of people may move because it's prettier out there. That's frankly why I've moved out of the city. Obviously, though, I'm not. I'm a poor person. No, I'm not that poor, but you know what I mean. I'm not this, like, major economic force. I'm talking about a huge portion of the tax base of the cities leaves the cities because they can have lower tax rates outside of the cities, and housing development has been incentivized outside of those cities. So we have a lot of the wealth of the cities being pulled out to the suburbs. This doesn't happen
Well-
as much in European states, right? Because they don't necessarily have some of the small city arrangements that we do.
Yes.
The way our cities are very small, and they're designed specifically along sort of Milton Friedman style economics to compete with each other. They're specifically designed to incentivize this phenomenon.
if you
Now,
are,
I think
if you are a major economic force, unlike Olive here, and you are watching my channel, consider donating. Consider subbing to the show. I am also a poor, and I would like universal basic income of your money. So please.
See, the thing is, I also think people think I'm, like, anti. I don't live in the city right now. Okay, I like living out in, like, rural areas. I prefer not cities right now. The problem is, I can appreciate the city in terms of the problem is, it has to do with like, planning and wealth management. And I think Wick kind of named the problem exactly when we have a really diffuse population is it's really difficult for us to have the wealth redistribution and penetrate those areas with effective services. And this is why a lot of the cities have been encouraging urbanization. Now, I don't think things have to go this way. I think the impetus towards urbanization is a kind of lack of imagination, frankly. But the truth is it's because it's easier and we know it works, and because we do see a lot of lost resources the more we encourage or straight up even incentivize suburbanization. Now, I have a solution that would be interesting. I think maybe you guys could hear it, because I'm not so anti suburbs, to be clear. I think one of the core issues is like the way that we've structured our cities and our states in America. I think the lines that we've demarcated are perfectly random, and they don't actually represent the relationships, right, between the city and the rural area. This is why on the West Coast you see Cascadia. People talk about forming the Cascadia state, and then right next to it you have this the hopeful state of Jefferson, right, where the
I
state of
live in there.
Idaho. You're in the state of Jefferson. Wow, have fun.
Yep.
I think actually sometimes
The
this is
people who
sometimes
want
like a
that are wild.
okay. Well, they're certainly they're right wing libertarian, but I mean on the same coin, the exact opposite side of the coin, you have the Cascadia freaks, and they're left wing, but they have the same imagination, they have the same hopes and dreams. And I mean certainly I think some of this is like fantasy LARPing. Don't get me wrong, but I actually think what is happening is people are trying to articulate the real causal relationships and the kind of like environmental economies of these areas.
I
Because
don't
what's
think that's what
true,
they're doing at all. Living in one of them, I don't think that's it at all.
you don't think so?
No, I think they want to live in states that align with them ideologically.
Well,
That's
that's part of
that's
it.
why
Yes,
they
I
want
mean
to
having
redraw the
a
lines.
shared cultural value is a way that we could imagine. I mean, there's a reason why we try to like impact certain
Just real quick on that though, because I don't know if I agree with that. I don't think most people, I'm sure some do, right? But I don't think most people move to places that align with them ideologically. I don't
I think
No,
they
that's a
but I
want
think
major
to.
people want to stay where
consideration.
they are and change the ideology of the place that
Yeah.
they
That
right. So
you
if
want
I
to
cut
feel
off
like you're in a
all of the
place.
if I cut off all of the big city people from my
I mean,
state
sure,
and turn it much more
you
red.
want the area that you live in to reflect your values. If that's your
Yes.
point, then I agree with that, right?
Yeah, because
But I think
people want to redraw the lines of states, creating these new states that are closer to what they are designing. Right? I hear
right,
all the time. I live in Southern
but the
Oregon.
area. Okay,
Go
but
ahead.
the well, how much of Southern Oregon gets absorbed by? I thought.
Almost
Oh,
like the entirety of Southern Oregon.
okay, well, that's disputed. That's not necessarily canonical Jefferson. I think that's disputed land, and there'll be heavy wars between the Cascadians and the Jeffersonians over
I'm talking
over
about
your
I'm
land.
talking about the very southern end of Oregon. Everything from like the middle up is all
Well,
their own
I'll
thing,
be
but
I will be
below
on the
that is
front
all
The
lines.
Oregon
I
rural
will be
and
on
Civil
the front
War.
lines fighting for you, brother.
Olive
You will
Olive
be
is
Cascadian.
channeling her inner Tim Pool here tonight.
I will be
Here
on
we
the
go.
front lines fighting for you, brother. That will be part of Cascadia, rest assured.
No, so I can tell you because I talk and live with these people. I live in a rural area in a very blue state, and they all wanted to change this to the state of Jefferson because they hate the blue cities that control us. That's like their narrative, and that I think that's much more in line with why they want to make these changes to these state lines that have nothing to do with like the housing situation
But
or
this
any
goes
of the
back.
land
Okay,
use.
it's true. It's true that people today, in a very populist era of politics, are very, very motivated by shallow ideological thinking. But I think the problem is, as Wick was saying before, which is that a lot of the wealth of these cities fails to penetrate these areas, and there's a lot of distrust that forms around that. People don't trust their governments, and that's for sometimes conspiratorial reasons, but sometimes for perfectly valid reasons as well. They feel that they're left behind. There isn't a safety net being built for them, and they feel, and now this might not necessarily be true, but they feel like if that they just shared more of an ideological basis, that more policies would pass, more services would pass that would actually impact them and benefit them, which is why they have a fantasy of the state of Jefferson, which would have more ideological coherence and potentially be able to push more policies out, be able to move things effectively more. Because it is true that the state of Oregon does move very blue. So, if they feel those services aren't reaching them, they're going to blame blue, right? I don't blame them for that.
I don't think they think that way at all. I just don't think. I think that that's a completely
Are we
valid
talking about
way to think about it.
Oregonians? Then I agree with you. Not thinking at all is probably Good
Oof,
answer here.
thank you, Wick. I appreciate you.
I love it. I love it. Gang, it's almost 9 o'clock.
Yeah, I
Been
gotta
a fun
go.
conversation. Tune in tomorrow. We're gonna have a gentleman on to talk who is at Burning Man, and we're going to talk to
Oh,
him
no.
about the issues surrounding Burning Man. You guys know all the shit that's going down over there? Like, you're gonna find out
Yeah.
tomorrow. It'll be,
There's a bit of
it's
Schadenfreude.
We'll find out, right? Rich people versus rain. Who wins? Guess we'll find out. But yeah,
Guys, sub to Wick.
you
Sub to Wick
can.
before he shuts it
You
off.
can
Go,
sub
go,
to
go.
Wick. You can donate. You can like the stream if you're watching this on YouTube and hit that subscribe button. If you're watching this on Twitch or Kick, you can give me some subs, bits, and follow me. All great. Like I said, tomorrow, Burning Man conversation. Thursday, we're gonna have PF Young. We're gonna have Red. We're gonna have maybe Wolf. We're gonna have Loaderbox. And we're gonna talk about Peterson's problems, Jordan Peterson, and his issues with and the Canucks there, and the colleges, and it'll be an interesting discussion. Friday, I don't know what we're gonna talk about. I might take Friday off, to be honest with you, but we'll find out. But yeah, tune in tomorrow. See you guys later. Who are we raiding out to? Who's streaming? Do any of you have a preferred raid target? No?
Don't know. Ooh, I don't know. Rezzy's chilling. Kid Botkins. Kid Notkins
Isn't
bot.
he a bot?
He's
I
a
don't
bot.
know if I want to raid a
he's
bot. Let's raid. Well, Rezzy is streamed, but I raided him last time. I don't mind double raiding, I guess, but it feels weird.
Ice beans. Ice beans.
Oh, ice beans. Yeah, okay, we'll go to ice beans.
Mm-mm.
Oh, is Ice Beans watching the channel right now? Okay. Well,
yeah.
you get a raid, Ice Beans.
How is she in chat?
Do you just watch, like, because I know people do this. People have told me they do this. Their stream, like Sad Kit Kat does this all the time. Their stream is them watching me stream.
Those bays.
Yeah, I mean, cool. But yeah, whatever. Like, so here you go, Ice Beans. Here's the raid.
I'm gonna chill in here if someone wants to come fight me. It'd be awesome if the people's elbow
Oh.
feels like magically fixing their phone so we could talk.
Olive, I can keep going on
reaction
these things, including the slavery
commentary
thing.
community